Hey there, everyone. It's Susan Pierce Thompson, and I just started this event and now I can't see myself. That's really funny. Hey, everyone. Tell me you're here in the chat thread. Linda is here from sunny Michigan. And Lori says she's usually fashionably late. LOL. Thank you, Lori, for telling everyone. I told Everett, we were in here like 20 minutes ago and we've been like, try to figure it out. It's a whole new platform. Andrew is here, says yo, yo, yo. And I was like, we're going to go live 3 minutes early and just say hi to people. And here we are 4 minutes after we're supposed to start. I don't know what it's like, pathological. Look at all the people flooding in. The chat thread is exploding so fast. I can't even read it. Okay. CR from Minnesota, Jennifer from London, Ontario. Yes, Brenda, it just got sound and pic. I don't know what happened to the picture, but it was off for a little bit. Sharon is from Israel. Hey, Sharon. Liz from Ontario. We got a lot of people from Ontario. Barb from Vashon Island. Where is Vashon Island, Barb? I don't know where that is. Jennifer from San Mateo. Lisa from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Marcia from Idaho. Susan from Fayetteville, North Carolina. Hey, from Utah. Jessica O'Connor from Rochester. Awesome. Marie from Cape Canaveral, Florida. Hey, everybody. Oh, Gabby from Switzerland. Yay. Hey, everybody. Barbara. Oh, no. Who's in Paris? Someone's in Paris. Oh, hey, everyone. So sweet to be with you. I want to welcome Everett Considine to the webinar, too. Everett is here. Let's get Everett right in the mix here. There he is. Hey, Everett.
Hello, everyone.
Everett's in Maui.
I am in sunny Maui.
Yep, totally. So sweet. Lydia says, is there supposed to be sound? I think we're going to put a sticky note up here saying what to do if your tech isn't working. But in general, try refreshing the screen. That's always a good start. You can also try exiting out of the room and coming back in. But yes, there is sound. Heather says aloha. Audrey from British Columbia. Pam says click on the play button to get it started. So just so you know, this is a new platform. Webinar Jam introduced a new platform. This is our first time doing a webinar in it. So my apologies if there are glitches. Everett and I really have been in here already for 20 minutes just getting started.
Figuring it out. Yep.
Yep. Denise from Colorado. She says, I love BLE. All right, everyone. Miranda from Ireland. Sligo, is that what it's called? Ireland? Wow, beautiful. Okay, so we're all here for the same reason, I think, to talk about navigating these intense times that we're in the midst of, right? And John Asraf, I don't know if you know who he is. He was featured in The Secret and stuff. He's a friend of mine, and he posted on his Facebook page. He's like, "This wasn't on my vision board." He said, "This wasn't on my if you want to make God laugh, make plans." And ain't that the truth? Like, none of us had this in our in our rifle scope, right? Like, okay, so I'm gonna not be allowed to leave the house for an unknown period of time. Yeah, none of us had this on our docket. So we're all in this together. We're muddling through, we're figuring it out. And what we're noticing, probably most of us, is our inner landscape is especially activated right now, right? Or at least has the potential to be activated. There are more pulls going on. And Everett and I are going to talk about that today from two different perspectives. Everett's going to cover it from a parts work perspective, which has to do with psychology. It has to do with the mind. It has to do with, our inner landscape. And he's also going to talk about it from an emotions perspective. And then I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of the brain, the neuroscience, the chemicals that are creating, if you will, that landscape, and what then later gets converted into thoughts and that inner landscape that Everett's talking about. We're going to cover both perspectives, and we're going to do it with an eye to giving you tools and solutions. And and also a helpful framework. I mean, I think the first, this is what I've learned from Everett, is the sort of the first most helpful thing is the right framework, the right way to be conceiving of the problem or the situation at all. And so, yeah, but I'm suspecting if you're here, you know who I am. I want to introduce you to Everett. You may or may not know Everett. I've done tons of webinars with him so far. He's led Brightline Freedom for Brightline Eating. And I first met Everett, gosh, was it in 2015? It was a long time ago now, 5 years ago. That boggles my mind.
Right.
That boggles my mind. So Lyndon Morris Del Rio, who is in the first Brightline Eating Bootcamp and now works for Brightline Eating, organizing and being the maven of our online support communities. Lyndon was in the first Brightline Eating Bootcamp, and we became friends. And she said, Susan, you really need to meet Everett Considine. Lyndon was working with Everett. Everett was her coach, was her practitioner. And they were doing sessions together. And she said, you have to meet this man. You have to. And I was busy and I blew it off. And then some time went by, and I was in a period of time where I was stuck in my own, I had left the 12-step food program that I was in, and I was trying to get my support in Brightline Eating, but Brightline Eating was a little fledgling organization. And I was kind of feeling lost and adrift. And I reached out to Lynn, and I remembered what she said about Everett, and I scheduled some sessions with Everett. And he helped me access the part of me that wanted me to go back to my 12-step program. And I thought that part of me, because I'd had so many years of sort of contented recovery in that program, I thought that part of me was a very strong, highest self kind of archetypal warrior woman part of me. And he helped me find that part of me. And it was actually like this really scared little girl. And she just wanted to be in a community where everything was told to her, like everything was secure, where the rules were really clear. And that was a revelation to me. It was a real revelation, and it created a real shift. And so that got Everett and I knowing each other. I mean, really, I want to say I only got 3 sessions with you, but I think the shift just happened in 1 session. Like, it was really fast. That's the thing about parts work often, is the shifts are really fast, which is nice. I'm a fan of fast solutions.
We all are.
Right. So anyway, since then, Everett has been working with our community almost exclusively. And this parts work framework has really become how we do the inner work in Brightline Eating. And so I want to turn it over to Everett now to tell you a little bit more about himself and his history with Brightline Eating. And what we're going to be doing here together today. So yeah, take it away, Everett.
Okay, thanks.
Whoops, that was the wrong thing. That's what I meant to do.
There we go. So hi. So my name's Everett Considine, and I think it's always interesting to hear people's BLE stories, right? Because it is a journey with lots of adventure. And my BLE story is particularly amazing based on what's come into my life from it. But I was always a slender person until about 20 years ago. My partner at the time died suddenly. It was very tragic. It was related to addiction. It was very intense. And I remember at the time, besides just having my life completely upended, maybe in a way that's only comparable to what's happening now. I remember the time being afraid that I wasn't going to grieve him properly, because I have got so many years of spiritual development and meditation. I've been meditating since I was 18 years old, and I had kind of come upon this idea of spiritual bypass, right? That you can use meditation to bypass emotional work. And so one of the gifts that came out of his passing was I decided to start doing my emotional work. I decided to start delving into learning about my psyche, and that led me on an adventure where I ended up in a gay men's retreat, and ended up kind of finding out that I had this real skill for coaching and counseling, and I eventually found my way to this healing modality called internal family systems, which is, you know, what we call parts work. And when I discovered parts work, it was like the missing piece of the puzzle. It was like the missing piece of the puzzle. Like it gave me a way to connect into that centered self that I had so cultivated through meditation, but also gave me a way to start to organize and get to know all the different voices inside of me. And I started having breakthroughs in my life. I started getting unstuck in areas that I thought would always be stuck in. And I decided I wanted to make it my new career, that I was going to also do parts work with people and teach people about internal family systems. And I dove into doing that. And and through this process, I ended up actually teaching IFS for several years with Jay Early, teaching his peer facilitation class. And Lyndon Del Rio, which Susan just mentioned, showed up in one of my classes. And we, you know, she's a go-getter, and she knows something good when she sees it. And she started working with me one-on-one right away. And we started, you know, the journey of doing parts work, and, you know, transforming various parts of her life and areas that she was stuck. And one of the things we worked on was weight loss, because internal family systems itself actually is really used a lot for people that have issues with food. In fact, Dick Schwartz, who developed it by working with bulimic patients. And so I started working with Lyndon around weight loss, kind of there's a certain way that you do it. And it didn't work. You know, she was getting the benefits of it, but she wasn't able to make that final click where she could really start taking the weight off again. So, so our coaching sort of slowed down, and then I hadn't talked with her for a while, and I saw on Facebook that she was losing all this weight. And it was maybe 3 months in, she's talking about how she was losing, you know, had lost 30 pounds with something called Bright Line Eating. And I remember at the time just feeling excited for her, you know, that she had found something that was working for her, because I know how much she wanted that. And then after a few more posts on Facebook, I was 65 pounds heavier than I am now, and had been struggling with my weight ever since my partner died. And I remember thinking, like, well, I should find out what she's doing, like, because I need to lose weight. And so I contacted her, and she was amazing. She took off all her weight in like 6 months, and has had bright lines ever since, and maintained her weight. And so I got into my first boot camp, and it was October 2015 that I did my first boot camp. And it was so funny because my life was so chaotic, and my eating was so disordered that I watched that first video, and then that was it. Then I was just back into the chaos of my life. BLE was nowhere in my mind. And but I didn't forget about it. Right. I was like, I want to do Bright Line Eating. And I know many of us have that thing where it takes us a while to start. Right. It just takes us a while to start. Well, in fact, when Lyndon told me about it, and she said, no sugar, no flour, I was like, is that even possible? No sugar, no. Is that even possible? So I tried it for a month. I tried doing no sugar, no flour for a month, and it is and realized it was possible. And all it meant was you stop eating crap. You just eat all whole food. You eat vegetables and fruit and meat and protein. And so once I had the reality of like, oh yes, it is possible, right? And I tried to do the boot camp in October, and then in February of 2016, that is when I did the boot camp again, and then that is when BLE clicked. That is when BLE clicked, and Susan, like Susan just said, Lyndon eventually connected Susan and I, and this very interesting thing started to happen, um, where Susan started to send me more and more Bright Line Eating people, and eventually, literally filled up my practice, and I was very effective with getting people back on track. People would call me, I'm having trouble with my lines, and I was very effective at helping people get back on track. And the word kind of got out to the community, and Susan kept sending me more people. And this magical thing started to happen where I started to gain this deep, deep level of insight into the inner parts of someone doing Bright Line Eating, right? And just the way it would happen if you were, I guess an eye surgeon, right? And all you did was surgery on eyes. Like eventually, everything about that, right? Like I was getting that kind of expertise. And Susan was tracking what was going on. And Susan and I were in discussions about bringing in more healing components into Bright Line Eating. And excuse me for a second here. So Susan invited me, and I think it was 2017, to speak at the conference. And I did a 1-hour talk. It was IFS and BLE. And I talked about kind of my insights up to that point, and I introduced people to the idea of the food controller and the food indulger and the battle that those two parts are in, and how that's the crazy that most of us deal with, is the battle between those two parts around our food. And and the talk was really well received. And Susan planted a seed that year where she said, well, maybe Everett will develop a course for us, an advanced parts work course. And so over the next year, I continued to work with Bright Line Eating people, and I started to formulate, started to think about, like, how would I teach the whole Bright Line Eating community what I'm learning from working with so many Bright Line Eating people. And the thing that came out of it was something we call the BLE parts map. The parts of us that are active in our Bright Line Eating journey. And it turned out the BLE parts map is pretty simple, and I'm pretty good at simplifying things. It's one of my gifts. And so the BLE parts map is the isolator, right? The part of you that keeps you from reaching out for support. The inner critic, the food controller, the food indulger, and then the wounded child. And that following year, we launched Bright Line Freedom. Susan and I developed Bright Line Freedom. We worked on it, and a really intensive 4 months long, a really intensive deep dive into internal family systems, parts work, as it relates to Bright Line Eating. And it was really well received. We had almost 1,000 people in the course, and then we started to create this new generation, this new wave of people in Bright Line Eating that also know parts work and know how to do internal family systems. In fact, some people have run off and become certified in IFS, and it's really The process is it's so simple. It's like deceptively simple. The way that if you personify something in your psyche in a way that you can relate to it, that it changes. It just changes. It changes things, or will change an issue really fast. And so,
Everett, can we right now actually just tell the story of that phone conversation that we had
yeah,
at 4:30 in the morning 4 days ago?
yeah,
Or
please tell
5,
it.
however many. So, I don't know if you've caught any of the Facebook Lives I've been doing lately, but I've been really candid that my experience of this whole COVID-19 thing has been really dramatic. It's been up, down, up, down, up, down. And it was getting to the point where it was just ridiculous. Like I would have a day where I felt fabulous, followed by just a day where I felt horrible. Really like couldn't practically function, had to crawl back into bed and put the pillow over my head and just cry. And so it sounds like bipolar disorder. Might be, I don't know, but on my good days I was feeling so good, and then something would happen. Usually my good days were characterized by like not much sleep, because I was like up late because I felt so great, and then I wouldn't sleep much, and then the awareness of like I'm not getting a good night's sleep, which is always a trigger for not feeling great for me. And then something would happen and I would plunge into a bad day. And I was on 16 days of this, literally by the day. Good day, bad day, 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 good day. 16 days, it was ridiculous. And I'm really self-aware. So I was talking to my friends about it, like, okay, tomorrow's I was like penciling it in. I'm like, oh no, I don't want to have to do a webinar. That's going to be a bad day a week from Friday. It's ridiculous. So I resolved, I was having a good day. I was feeling great. And I really resolved to break the pattern. And I was like, there's two things that are happening on bad days. I'm not getting enough sleep the night before, and I'm isolating. I'm not making any phone calls. And so I got on the horn with my life coach, Monica Leggett, and we like mapped out a strategy for making sure I got to sleep on time. And I was like in bed there to sleep, and I couldn't sleep. 10 o'clock at night, lights were out, eye mask was on, Valerian was taken an hour ago, like couldn't sleep. And I listened to sleep meditations for several hours, cried a little bit, couldn't sleep. 4:30 in the morning, still can't sleep. And 4:30 in the morning for me in New York is 10:30 at night for Everett. Yeah. So I called him. I left my house in the bitter cold and I walked around my neighborhood and I called him and I'm like, he's like, how are you? And I'm like, not so great, dude, I can't sleep. And he asked me what was going on. We talked for a bit. And then I think we talked for quite a while. And then he was like, I'm going to go to bed. And then my part, something happened inside of me where I started to flip out. Like Everett was going to go to bed. I'm going to be alone. I still can't sleep. Now it's like 5:50 a.m. or something. And I told him, I said, I'm really anxious because you're going to go to sleep. And I'm about to have like a horrible day. Tomorrow's slated to be a bad day. And it's going to be, I haven't slept at all. And he said, well, tell me about this part of you that's so sure you're going to have a hard day. He said, it sounds like a horribilizer part, right? It's just making everything horrible. And I said, yeah. And he asked me two questions that changed my life. Like I have not had a bad day since. He said, can you personify that part? Can you take it and make it into a little character that you could relate to? What would it look like if it were a character? And it was so clear. It was like, he's like the size of a pencil and skinny and like Gumby. Do you remember the character Gumby with the skinny rubbery arms and legs? And then a big COVID-19 coronavirus ball, fuzzy head. And he's purple, not green like Gumby, he's purple. And he's shrieking at me, it's going to be a horrible day. You haven't slept. Everyone's going to go to bed. It's bad. It's so bad. It's getting worse, 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 worse. I'm like, oh my God, this little dude's flipping out. And Everett's like, okay, you got him, right? Like, okay, there's the little guy. I'm like, yeah, I can see him clear as day. And then he asked me, that was the first question. Can you turn him into a character? Can you personify him? That was the first question. And then Everett said, well, I guess there's three questions, right? Everett said, this is the magic right here. He said, can you ask him how he's trying to help? So I asked him, how are you trying to help me? Because all our parts are trying to help us. And the little guy said, yeah, I'm just trying to make you declare it a horrible day so you'll just decide you're doing nothing and lie on the couch all day. I want you to declare it a horrible day so that you will do nothing for the whole day and just get to lie on the couch because you just need to rest. And it dawned on me, this is this part strategy for getting me to rest. Because I would on my horrible days. That's why I would get to sleep so early and set myself up for a good day, because I was going to bed at like 7 o'clock on those nights. So then Everett asked me, the third question was, could you ask him if maybe he'd be amenable to, like, instead of making it a horrible day, could we just make it a rest and recharge day? Could you just, like, maybe wipe your calendar of unnecessary things and rest a lot, but it doesn't have to be a horrible day? Would he be okay with that? So I asked him that, and he was like, okay, I guess that's a good idea. And that was it. And then I felt peaceful. Everett went to sleep, and I got 0 minutes of sleep last night, according to my Oura Ring, official scientific data, 0 minutes of sleep. And I had an okay day. It was a rest and recharge day. I haven't had a bad day since. It's like 5 days later or whatever. It's, anyway, unbelievably powerful, this parts work thing, in just the simplest few little moments.
Yeah, I'm really hopeful. I have a feeling there's a number of people that are listening to this webinar are going to have that kind of insight around their own crisis response part.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just need to know that, well, it's the process. It's the process of externalizing that, knowing that it's not you, it's just a part of you. And it's trying to help.
They're all trying to help.
All our parts are trying to help. Yeah.
So I want to, Everett, are you set? Do you have any more you want to say, or you want me to launch into, like, the history of the parts?
I think that was my story. I wanted to just tell my BLE story, my bringing IFS to BLE story. And and so, why don't you, like, launch in? So Sue, for the family reunion that we launched Brightline Freedom, it was all about self-compassion. And Susan did this incredible presentation on the history of parts work as it relates to self-compassion. And you're going to do, like, an abbreviated version of that now, right?
Exactly. So I'm going to do, basically what I want to do right now is answer the question for anyone who's not familiar with parts work. Like, why should you believe in this theory? Like, what's the I'm a psychology professor. So this is something that I would, for example, present to a Psych 101 class and just say, in terms of modern therapeutic approaches, parts work is one of, I would say, the top two evidence-based therapeutic approaches, the other being cognitive behavioral therapy. And basically, there are relatively few, in my professional opinion, very, very sharp knives in the drawer when it comes to creating shifts in someone's behavior and inner lived experience, but behavior, experience, inner state, all of it, in a short amount of time. And parts work is one of those methods. As a matter of fact, in my experience, I have never experienced anything more powerful. The 12 steps have been a hugely foundational part of my own journey doing the inner work, and they're extremely powerful. I don't have a sense of how parts work compares because I'm super conscious of the fact that I didn't start doing parts work until I'd already worked the 12 steps 14 times in 5 different 12-step programs for 24 years. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. I came to parts work already with a very long history of trying to do my inner work and trying to figure out what was going on inside of me and so forth. So it's not a fair comparison. But I will say that I have never in my entire life experienced a modality this powerful, where in a very short period of time, I can take something that feels intractable, where I've been beating my head against a wall, becoming bloody, not able to like wrangle myself into, the kind of into submission, into the kind of behavior that I want to see for myself. And then I'll do some parts work and it just melts. It's just easy. I feel like all of a sudden all of me is on board with, doing what I want to be doing anyway. And it's magical. Like I just explained, right? Like just bad days just went away, 5 days ago because of a 5-minute conversation, 5 minutes of a conversation with Everett to just do this parts work. So anyway, I want to give you a sense of the history of parts work because I think contextualizing this in the history of psychology is important. So I'm going to share my screen right now and just do a brief little lecture for you, a brief history of parts work. And yeah, okay. So if you want a more in-depth version of this, read Many Minds, One Self, Evidence for a Radical Shift in Paradigm by Richard C. Schwartz and Robert R. Falconer. It was published in 2017, and it's where much of what I'm about to present is derived. They did a really beautiful job just compiling the history. And the question at hand right now is none other than the ancient philosophical question of who are we really? Like, what is the nature of self? What is the nature of soul? What is the nature of a human being? The identity of a human being. And the view that we are all steeped in is something I'm going to call the monomind view, meaning when we ask, who am I? The answer is self-evident. It just seems obvious. I am me, one person, one mind, undivided, with free will. And if I'm struggling, it's because I'm not doing the right thing, right? And that's what we think. That's what our society as a default believes. So this view is both ubiquitous and naturally assumed. It's everywhere. It's part of the air we breathe, kind of, where you don't even realize you're being taught it. No one would even realize that they're teaching it to you. It's just what everyone seems to think. And so we never question whether it's true. More importantly, we never question whether it's helpful. Like, is this the best construct for conceiving of yourself if you're trying to live an effective life, to be happy, to be well, to be able to overcome obstacles, most of which, if you haven't discovered this yet, most of which are of our own making. Not all, there's some real stuff going out there in the world that are obstacles, but typically the biggest obstacles have to do with how we interact and react, right? And yeah, so I just realized I am going to right now mute the chat thread. I forgot to do that. If you've never been on a webinar with me, I have a little quirk in me. I always mute the chat thread when we really get going because, I just did it, sorry. Because of the science that I'm aware of that basically shows not only do people not multitask well in terms of reading language and hearing language at the same time, unless it's the same language. You'll notice that when there's words on the slide, I always just say those words because you can't do both at the same time. More critically, people don't enjoy themselves when they're multitasking. Even something as simple as having lunch with your very, very best friend, if your cell phone is on the table, you enjoy the lunch less well because just the presence of that distraction is a buzzkill. So I want us to enjoy ourselves. So we're just going to keep the chat thread muted for now. Now, that said, we will unmute it at the end and we will be doing an extended Q&A. So if you have questions, like I'm seeing Elizabeth asking right here, could you suggest some reading material that gives an overview of parts work? Elizabeth, can you just jot that question down and put it back in the chat thread when we get to our Q&A? Jen Moon just see, Jen Moon's on my team. She said, hi, everyone. We're going to mute the chat thread for the presentation and open it up once we... Thank you, Jen, for getting to that. Okay, beautiful. And like Katie had a question back there. Just jot down your questions and we can answer them at the end. Okay. So we're all steeped in this monomind view. And according to the monomind view, if someone has competing parts operating inside them, that's a sign that something's wrong, actually, that they're mentally ill. And there were a series of movies in the 1950s and 1970s. This one won an Academy Award. This one was nominated for an Academy Award. Amazing acting. And these movies were about women that had multiple personality disorder, which is a mental illness characterized by people who have very extreme and disruptive parts inside of them. And from a therapist's perspective, the multiple personality disorder, sort of the pathologicalization of parts even kind of makes sense. In particular, because patients coming into your office who have strong, active parts, well, they nearly always report having been severely abused. And if their parts are creating deviant and distressing symptoms and they've been severely abused, it's easy to conclude that this is a disorder, right? So the assumption, even among therapists, has been that a healthy mind is unitary and an unhealthy mind has parts, right, is divided in some way. Now, multiple personality disorder was renamed dissociative identity disorder in 1994 when the 4th version of the DSM was published. We're now on the 5th version of the DSM, and it's still dissociative identity disorder. So, okay, so that's the state that we're in right now in terms of mainstream society. The trouble is that the monomind view doesn't work very well. It doesn't actually work. It doesn't give us the outcomes that we're looking for. It leaves us feeling stuck. It leaves us feeling like we are somehow at war with ourselves. And it leaves us confused about why we're not acting in our own best interest. Why are we not doing the things that we wish we were doing? Why are we overreacting? Why are we not taking action when we feel like we should? Why are we eating again when we're trying to do bright line eating? For goodness sakes, right? The monomind view doesn't have good answers to that question other than like, you're a bad person, like you're not ponying up, right? So what happens is we keep watching ourselves acting against our own highest good all the time. And we know that we've got fears. We know that we have harsh self-judgments sometimes, a voice in our head that's really nasty to ourselves. We have all kinds of emotions and thoughts and all of this is like sort of keeping us from being who we want to be, from doing the things we want to do, from acting in our own best interests. So what do? Well, there's a variety of things we do. Maybe we hide or ignore what we're not liking about ourselves and sort of stay in denial, just eat more or whatever. But more often we work on it, right? We wrestle with ourselves. We do something like going to therapy. We learn to meditate. We try harder. And often it still doesn't work, right? Still exhibiting the behaviors that are bothersome. And then something like COVID-19 happens where anxious and overwhelmed and distressed parts really come to the fore, right? Like, so we're sometimes experiencing feelings of a lot of strength, right? Like me on my horrible days, not functional, crawling back into bed, crying, feeling like I'm just not up for this. I don't know if I can face this reality. This feels too hard. And at times like that, we come face to face with like, something's not working inside myself. Or perhaps your eating might be the thing that's feeling like that, right? Where you're not feeling like the lion here in this picture. So what I want to let you know in this lecture is that there is another way. There is another way. And the purpose of this lecture is to invite you to take a second look at who you really are deep down, to present a different paradigm, a paradigm that most importantly is more useful. Like it produces better results, more true to your lived experience. And I'm also going to argue more true to the neuroscience of how the brain is actually organized and how it works. So this is the brain, and I found a picture of the brain with all these little lights lit up in it because this is the this is the parts activated brain. Like there are parts in the brain. And it's not just in the mind, but it's in the brain. So the various parts of us that feel different ways and want different things are generated neurologically in distinct areas of the brain. It turns out that consciousness is separate. And I'm going to talk to you about this a little bit later as well. I'm just going to use a quote from one of the premier neuroscientists to present that point. But the paradigm in a nutshell is that the self, who we are, isn't one, but many. And that's it. Just with that helpful idea, so much movement in terms of inner work and growth and peace is possible once you just get over the hurdle of understanding that reality. We have parts. We have parts. Now, in terms of the history of psychological thought, this is a minority view, but it's a strong and persistent minority view. And I want to share with you quickly the history of this perspective. The first written record of the many minds concept comes from an ancient Egyptian text where a man is basically arguing with his ba, or his soul. Not this, but his is what that should say. That T needs to be taken off there. A man is arguing with his ba, or soul, and the man wants to kill himself, basically. And he's trying to convince this other part of him to let him do it. And it doesn't go so well. The other part of him is like, no, you can't kill yourself. And the guy's like, oh, but please, self or soul, I'll make sure that we get a really good burial and that we get lots of stuff in our tomb. And then the other part of him's like, nah, dude, still not going for it. The text ends sort of unclear about whether the guy actually has decided to kill himself, but it sounds like it resolves with like, okay, now we're harmoniously just going to keep living is what it sounds like. But anyway, so that's the first written record of parts. The best, in my opinion, argument for parts, like just the slam dunk, mic drop, clearest statement that I personally feel is irrefutable, comes from Socrates, who was a strong believer in parts. And Socrates absolutely believed that the mind is multiple, and he said it with one simple concept. One mind, a unified mind, cannot both want and not want at the same time. Therefore, we are all at least two, is what he said. Therefore, we are all at least two. The mind must be at least dual. At least. Because look, how often do you want and not want that cookie, right? How often do you want and not want to text that person, right? All the time. And therefore there are parts. It's like, it's as clear as day, right? So Socrates believed in parts. Now we're still BC, right? We're still, 2,500 years ago. Plato believed in parts and wrote about it extensively. Aristotle believed in parts. And this was brief, this was longer in my other lecture on this, but the Bible talks about parts. Friedrich Nietzsche talks about parts. William James, the American father of psychology in America, wrote about parts. Sigmund Freud talked about parts. Carl Jung talked about parts. Clearly people who have thought very, very deeply about the mind and its nature and its roots believed, really upon analysis, you cannot conclude that the mind is unitary. There's too much going on in there. There's too much division, right? Interestingly, if you go around the world in indigenous cultures, the Fijians, the Algonquins, the Karens believed that everyone has two souls or selves. The Chichi, the Ashanti, the Yukagir, the Dahomey all believe that there are three souls or selves that each person has. The Dakotas believe that we have 4 souls or selves. The Malays believe we have 7 souls or selves. So independently, all these native cultures routinely, came up with the notion like, hey, we're not one, we are many. So essentially, from ancient times through the Renaissance until the modern day, the mind's multiplicity has been discovered, lost, discovered, lost, discovered, and lost again. If you look at theory and the intellectual sort of, each theorizer stands on the shoulders of giants, right? And so these ideas take root and flourish, and then they're lost, and then they take root and flourish, and then they're lost over and over and over again. So that is some of the history. I want to ask what the neuroscience says. What does the neuroscience say about the idea that we have parts? Because frankly, that's what I care most about. I'm a neuroscientist. My PhD is in brain and cognitive sciences. And neuroscience weighs in on this, actually. Is there one mind, or do we have many minds? If you look at the brain, now I will say it is still unclear and contentious how exactly the brain gives birth to the mind. Consciousness itself is a mystery. However, there have been experiments done that very much speak to the question of unified versus divided consciousness. And the first line of research I want to tell you about is split brain research, which was done primarily in the 1960s as a treatment for intractable severe epilepsy. So these epileptic patients were having grand mal seizures many, many times a day to the point where they were non-functional. And epilepsy is a condition of the brain that spreads, unfortunately. And so in certain extremely epileptic patients, where the epilepsy was being generated at the moment exclusively or primarily in one hemisphere of the brain, they would go in and divide the brain into two so that the epilepsy wouldn't spread from one hemisphere to the other. Now, splitting the brain is actually not that hard because not the sole, but by far the primary. Like almost all of the neurons that connect the two hemispheres are right here in this horseshoe-shaped structure called the corpus callosum. This is a super highway bundle of neurons that transmits information super fast from the left to the right and back again. When you sever those neurons, the two hemispheres can't talk to each other at all. And when this was done in split brain patients, you were left with two minds. The language is in the left hemisphere, so the left hemisphere could talk, the right hemisphere could not. It was mute, it could not understand or speak language. This hemisphere could talk, this one couldn't. And it turned out also, interestingly, that this hemisphere was exceedingly happy and this hemisphere was exceedingly depressive. It also turned out through a series of ingenious experiments that this hemisphere is always making up stories about what's going on, to the point where the right hemisphere would do something and the left hemisphere would spin a story about why it had decided to do that, even though it had not decided to do that. It couldn't have decided to do that because it was happening with the hand that the right hemisphere controls. There's contralateral control, which means the left hemisphere controls the right hand, the right hemisphere controls the left hand. So the right hand would the left hand would do something. So the right hemisphere had done it. And then the left hemisphere would take credit for that action and tell an elaborate and totally bunk story about why it had decided to do that. And the researcher would question the left hemisphere intently, and it would absolutely hold by its convictions. So from that series of studies, the notion of something called the left hemisphere interpreter was born. It's interpreting events and rationalizing our behavior in light of what we've just done. Like, I know why I picked up that food because I blah, 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 blah. Well, maybe you just had too much downregulation in your nucleus accumbens, right? And so you grabbed the food, right? You don't actually know. I mean, you're telling yourself that's why you ate it, maybe, but it could just be a story, right? Anyway, from these experiments, you can see that consciousness is actually quite separate. And as long as you don't intermingle it, it remains separate. Anyway, I got to meet this man a few years ago at a lecture that he gave at the University of Rochester. Brilliant man. He's, I would argue, the preeminent neuroscientist in the world. He did those split brain experiments when he was just a grad student and a postdoc. And I asked him after the lecture, I said, what's your latest thinking about consciousness and how it arises? And he told me, he just looked me in the eye. This was like a long time ago. It was 15 years ago or something. He said, consciousness, we are really sure now, consciousness is a localized phenomenon, meaning the part of your brain that moves your arm is the part of your brain that also has the notion of what it feels like to be moving your arm. And this quote, if I want you to, the word systems is vague here. He's using it in a technical way, but I want you to think of this as parts or consciousness. So we've moved toward the idea of a plethora of systems of consciousness, a plethora of systems of being inside the brain. We no longer think of the brain as being organized into two conscious systems at all, but into multiple dynamic mental systems. So the idea of even the split brain doesn't go far enough. Michael Gazzaniga now feels certain that consciousness is arising in localized ways throughout the brain. And it's almost like oceanic, like it's a wave that comes up, and a part of the brain that becomes particularly active will give rise to the consciousness about what that brain part wants, needs, is thinking at that moment. Okay. Another very important corroborating line of evidence comes from artificial intelligence. So since the 1950s and 60s, really, when the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab boldly announced that it would have robots doing our laundry before the end of the decade, that was the 60s, and they live televised this robotic arm building a pyramid of blocks. And I believe the arm started, it picked up a block. It was supposed to build a pyramid. That was its job. And it had a bunch of blocks laying on a table. And this robotic arm picked up a block, moved it to what it assumed would be the top of the pyramid, and dropped it. And of course, it forgot to factor in gravity. So the block dropped down to the table, and then it moved a block into the next level spot down or whatever. Anyway, note that we do not have robots doing our laundry yet. Not to say that artificial intelligence is useless, just to say that in trying to create intelligent systems that even come close to approximating human intelligence, we've learned a lot about the way the human mind works. And from the words of Marvin Minsky, the co-founder of MIT's Artificial Intelligence Lab, here's the lesson that he said that he's learned through decades and decades and decades and decades of trying to build intelligent systems. He said a unitary computer program can't mimic any form of intelligence. What's needed are parts, many specialized agents for different jobs. When we join these agents in societies working together in certain very special ways, this leads to intelligence. There's no way that with the intelligence we exhibit that's a unified thing. So fast forward to the modern day. This dude here is Richard Schwartz, Dick Schwartz. And in the early 1980s, he was at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and he was a family systems therapist. So family systems therapy is the kind of therapy where therapists look at the role of a person inside of a family system. So you've heard of like birth order, for example. Birth order work is a family systems idea, that the oldest takes on certain responsibilities and the youngest, will have certain traits or whatever. And all the notions of like one person in the family system is the scapegoat and one is the peacekeeper, and those sorts of ideas. And Dick Schwartz was working with bulimics, And he did a clinical trial with these bulimics to see, how great this family systems approach was working to help them stop their binging and purging. And the results were that it didn't help at all. Like, it didn't help at all. And he was like, what? And so he started interviewing the bulimics carefully one-on-one to try to dig deeper, because he really believed in family systems. And he heard them say things like, well, yeah, I binged yesterday, and I fought inside myself about it for hours. Like, the binge part was getting so strong, but the part of, the food controlling part, the part of me that wanted to like not binge was strong too. And the bulimic started to talk about these parts of themselves in ways that reminded Dick Schwartz of a family system, but an internal family system. Like, they had a family inside of them, like a cluster of parts that were operating around this war of like to binge or not to binge. And so he started to talk to these patients and get curious about their parts. And that is the birth of what we now call internal family systems therapy, IFS, internal family systems, where it all starts with getting curious about your parts. Now, from an IFS perspective, trauma doesn't create parts. That's not how it goes. What happens is that trauma makes the parts we have already more extreme and more separate from each other, and therefore more noticeable and perhaps more problematic, like more symptoms coming from those parts, right? And so my assumption now, and the assumption of a lot of people in psychology who've really gotten hip to this parts perspective and the neuroscience behind it, is that the healthy mind is absolutely multiple. It's just more harmonious. So therefore, the inner parts don't stand out as much. They can go unnoticed. I mean, you can live decades without even realizing that you have parts inside, parts of you that feel different ways about things, until it's pointed out. And then it usually resonates, right? Like in the 1980s, when inner child work became really popular, and there were New York Times bestselling books published on inner child work, the notion of an inner child just took off like wildfire because everyone can relate to it. Like, of course I have an inner child, an inner wounded child, right? Who doesn't have that, right? So your parts can go unnoticed, but as soon as they get pointed out, like as soon as someone, in our circles hears about the food controller or the food manager and the food indulger, they're like, oh yeah, I got those parts, like for sure, right? You got the part that wants a handful of nuts after dinner and the part that's saying, no, you don't get a handful of nuts after dinner, right? Of course. And so, then a crisis happens, like this COVID-19 crisis, and all the news that we're all being exposed to, and the anxiety ratchets up, and we start to experience, I was just saying, trauma, crisis, trauma. It makes the parts more extreme and more noticeable, right? So here we are, Everett and I. This is a picture of us at the very first Bright Line Eating family reunion. Here we are in the present day. Everett Considine is bringing his internal family systems expertise to us, and also his years now as a Bright Lifer, doing Bright Line Eating himself and in the Bright Line Eating community. And we've already given his background, but what I want to point out here before I hand it back to Everett to go into what he's about to share with us about dealing with anxious, overwhelmed, and fearful parts is that Everett is an innovator. Everett is absolutely an innovator. He has, for example, Everett has single-handedly become the world's leader in this part called the isolator. Because in Bright Line Eating, when we eat off plan, there's this powerful isolationist force, right? That at sometimes can be so strong that even with the voice in our head relentlessly saying, you should reach out to somebody about and even with a universe of people who are loving and caring and non-judgmental and there to support us at any moment. And we know that. We can't bring ourselves to reach out, right? So Everett started to, work with people and realize like, oh, there's this isolator part. Certainly when people's food is off and they're struggling, they're usually at the periphery of bright line eating. They're not in the center, like really getting support. So he discovered 14 archetypes of different isolator parts. The isolator is not just one character, right? There's a whole cast of characters. And right now, because of this crisis, in the entire internal family systems world, Everett has innovated for us the map of the parts that get activated during fearful and uncertain times during a crisis. So what's happening is Everett and I are like in discussion and dialogue, and this work is bubbling out of the melding between bright line eating and parts work. So I'm going to turn it over to Everett to share with us what he has innovated, like what he's discovering about the parts that get active in a crisis when we're afraid.
Oh, thanks, Susan. I love that. I love that presentation. You know what it leaves me? It leaves me in that place of wonder about the brain and the psyche. Right?
Yeah.
I was just during it, I was just like in this place of like, God, how like magnificent and unbelievable these vehicles are that we have. And that we understand so little still.
So little.
Right? So little. So little. Oh my gosh. So yeah. Well, and before we I start on the presentation, one of the things I wanted to say is you can think a lot about parts, right? But what really is powerful is when we start to experience parts work. At least parts work, the way we do it in Bright Line Eating, the way I present it, the way we do it in our classes is very experiential. Yeah. And what I want to start with is I'm just going to do a short guided meditation for all of us. And so if you're not able, if you're driving or whatever, you're in a loud room full of kids, don't worry about doing this. But if you're able, I want to invite you to just close your eyes and take a breath. And I want to invite you to notice your thinking. Just notice what's on your mind. Just notice what's on your mind. Notice your feelings and emotions. And non-judgmentally notice, like you don't have to change anything. You're just noticing what's on your mind. And then feel the top of your head. Feel the muscles in your face. Relax your face. Relax your jaw. And relax all the little muscles around your eyes. And feel the back of your head and your neck and your shoulders and your chest. And feel and just allow your breath to deepen. And feel your upper back, your lower back, your belly. Feel your upper arms, your elbows, your forearms, your wrists and your hands. And feel your hips and your pelvis, your thighs, your knees, your calves, your ankles, and your feet. And take a breath into your belly. take a deeper breath into your belly. And take the deepest breath you can into your belly. Take a breath into your heart. Take a deeper breath into your heart. And take the deepest breath you can into your heart. And take a breath into your mind. Just focus on your forehead or your third eye as you breathe. Take a deeper breath into the mind. And take the deepest breath you can into the mind. Something that's very central to internal family systems and parts work is the idea that we all have a core, that we all have an authentic self, that we have a centered self. And I want you to just notice if this brief meditation has brought you more in contact with your centered self. Has this brought you more in contact with your centered self? And if it hasn't, don't judge yourself. um, but I always want to start from, you'll notice in all my lectures, all my talks, I always start with that grounding meditation, because meditation allows us to come back into ourselves, come back to our center, come back out of the mind. And so now I'm going to load my presentation here. Yeah. So go ahead and open your eyes in your own time and see if you can bring some of that calm with you as you bring your attention back to the slide. So handling stress, fear, and anxiety in times of crisis. A big part of what we do in parts work and what I teach in our courses is we're helping people to find and live from their authentic self, to find and live from their centered self. And a lot of the positive routines and the habit stacks, and there's so much that we do in Bright Line Eating that's about creating a place, creating structures in our life that allow us to live from our centered self. You know, and many people know when their lines are bright and there's no food cravings, they're neutral around food, and they don't have that toxicity of sugar and flour in their body stirring them up. Notice that it's pretty easy to be in your centered self when you're doing bright line eating. And then you've got all these incredible habits that help you stay in your centered self. And so really the conversation that we've been having in bright line eating is always about being in your centered self, right? Because that's the part of you that's going to make the best decisions. And and then I'm going to talk a little about the centered self in crisis, right? Because what a blessing to go through crisis from your centered self versus from your protective parts. And so calm, and these are the 8 C's of centered self, authentic self that we talk about in internal family systems. The first C is calm. That rather than panicking, the centered self takes some deep breaths, stays grounded, and proceeds with a steady step and heart. The centered self is confident. Instead of feeling like we cannot win or that we're weak or broken, the centered self knows that we already have everything we need within us to make it through high stress situations. The centered self is curious. When crisis sets in, the centered self gets curious and explores these. Centered self looks for opportunities to manage the stress and learn something new from it. The centered self is clear. Feelings of crisis can create so much static in our heads, but the centered self takes the time to cut through these distractions and confusions. The centered self adjusts perspectives to see things as they are and to think clearly. The centered self is compassionate. Crisis feelings in parts can be combative, selfish, aggressive, and otherwise toxic. But the centered self recognizes the worth and humanity within ourselves and within others. The centered self pursues kindness and generosity instead of judgment and cruelty. The centered self pursues kindness and generosity instead of judgment and cruelty. The centered self is creative. Parts may experience tunnel vision when feeling in crisis. While that kind of stress and panic can close our scope of perspective, the centered self is open to new ideas and innovations. Creativity shows us new ways to work through the circumstances that trigger crisis. The centered self is courageous. When parts feel afraid, and especially when they want to give up, the centered self is ready to experience this fear and write it out. Courage isn't a lack of fear, it's the ability to face fear and keep going. The centered self is connected. When feelings of crisis make our parts want to isolate, either quietly or aggressively, the centered self knows that the human connections are essential to our mental, emotional, and physical health. So much of the kind of support we give in Bright Line Eating is to help people learn how to access and live from their centered self. And Bright Line Sisu, this Finnish word, this idea of perseverance, is something that we're going to take in this course that we're doing, and we're going to really focus on the centered self. How do you get access to it? How do you maintain access to it? How do you come back to it when you get knocked off balance? How quickly can you come back to it when you get knocked off balance? Now, when I started formulating this teaching, I put a lot of thought into what's happening? What's happening inside of us during a crisis? What is happening? And at first, I got very caught up with this idea of a focus on overwhelm, and then I had an insight that simplified it in a way that then created a lot of clarity. How I'm defining crisis for this talk is a fear-producing event that happens in your life. So something happens, right? You may be going along, living your life. Maybe you're in your centered self. Your Bright Line Eating program is really strong and steady, or we're not, right? But something happens, like a pandemic happens, right? The thing about this pandemic is that it's happening to all of us, right? Or who knows, maybe you get a cancer diagnosis, maybe someone close to you dies, right? Where we have crises show up, but a fear-producing event happens in your life and your inner system becomes flooded with fear. Your inner system becomes flooded with fear. And then, from a parts perspective, your crisis response parts become activated. So the parts of you that come up to protect you from feeling that overwhelming flood of fear become activated. And many times, these parts themselves compound the fear, making it deeper, bigger, or otherwise more overwhelming. If we're not aware of this as it's happening, we move deeper into overwhelm. So if you weren't doing parts work, if you didn't have this model to work from, well, something might happen in your life and you get flooded with fear, and then your normal defensive parts spike up and you react from them. And maybe you make it worse, maybe you make it better, maybe you're dealing with so much fear that there's no thought of coming back to center, right? But now that you have this framework, right, you can notice, like, oh, you can even notice when it happens. You might be feeling very centered, and then you hear about something on the TV, and then suddenly you realize, like, oh, I'm not centered anymore. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And in that moment, you could start to look for the parts that have been activated. And what I've done is I've come up with 14 kind of archetypes, actually 15, of protective parts that get activated. Now, when we listen to our fears from our centered self, we're able to act appropriately and effectively. That's what we're trying to do. Something happens that creates a flood of fear, and then the ideal scenario is we stay rooted in our centered self, and that fear is a messenger. Our emotions are messengers. They're there to tell us something, and we can listen to the fear and we can act appropriately and make the changes that we're being called to make. However, when protective parts are triggered instead, we can find ourselves doing way too much or not enough, and then we find ourselves in a state of overwhelm. Now, this is just talking a little bit about parts work. We've done a pretty good job of defining it. But, for most people before parts work, their inner world is just a jumble of feelings, emotions, and thoughts. And there's not a lot of order, and it changes like the weather throughout the day, right? And someone that has no mindfulness at all of their internal state is completely unconscious to that. They're just reacting to what's happening inside of them. And what we do in parts work is we actually start to focus in on something in particular that's going on inside of us. And we give identities and images to our inner experiences. We personify them in order to make them clearer and most importantly, to empathize with them. Just like Susan personified her horribilizer, right? And then suddenly she's in dialogue with this part, and she's making new agreements, and like she's having transformation that happens, because now instead of just having this miscellaneous sense of a bunch of cascade of horrible scenarios, she's actually now externalized that as a part. And that's the second step here, is that we externalize the inner experience in a way that allows us to stay more centered, right? Soon as that horribilizer was externalized and suddenly she could see the horribilizer, oh, well, instantly in that moment, she is more set in her centered self. And now she's in her centered self interacting with that part. And to stay centered, we separate or distinguish ourselves from these inner experiences so that we may think and feel more clearly and effectively. So where before parts work, it's just a jumble of thoughts and feelings and, impulses. As you do more and more parts work, you actually go under the covers of your psyche and start to understand in a really specific way what's going on. In a really specific way. And even just the beginning stages of learning parts work allows you to start living more and more from your centered self, because you're able to notice when you're knocked off center, and then you're able to work with those parts. Now, I asked myself a question, and the question was, when a system is flooded, when our inner system is flooded with fear, what are the protective parts that come up? Boy, and I did not have to look very far, right? Because every kind of protective part imaginable is being triggered right now in people all around us, right? And so that's literally how I started to formulate this list, is I started to think of all the ways different people are showing up because of the fear of the pandemic. One of the, so I'm just going to list these names. And as I list these names, I want you to notice which of these resonate with you. Which of these protective parts do you have? And just notice it. Maybe remember it or write it down, because I'm going to do a little bit of experiential work at the end so you can get to know this part. But the first on the list is the horribilizer, right? And I've been working in my one-on-one work with people, working with people's horribilizers for years, right? Because a lot of us, when things become uncertain, have a part of us that starts spinning out worst case scenarios, right? And that those worst case scenarios end up creating more fear, right? Now, it's kind of interesting when you're in a time like this pandemic where a lot of those worst case scenarios are actually happening somewhere else on the planet, right? So it makes it much more real that that could happen to you, right? But sometimes people have a horribilizer that is just spinning out all the horrible possibilities of something. And when you look at it rationally, you know, it's not very probable those things are going to happen. But if you have a horribilizer, just notice that. You have a part that when things are uncertain starts to fixate on all the worst things that could happen. The isolator, right? The isolator distances us from others. So boy, I have a strong isolator when I'm flooded with fear. Like that's the first impulse, is to pull back into my shell, right? To isolate. And of course, that can end up making things worse, because typically, if you're being flooded with fear, you actually need support and could use support, right? So the isolator, in trying to isolate you to help you, doesn't allow you to reach out for the support that you'd have. So the horribilizer, the isolator, and then the caretaker, the codependent, right? So you get flooded with fear and immediately you're concerned about helping other people, right? You know, you're concerned about caretaking other people. And boy, that's another strategy of mine, right? I immediately go to like, how can I help make people calm, right? How can I help regulate other people's nervous systems? But many of us that have a strong caretaker use it as a way of not taking care of ourselves and then end up in a state of burnout. The hero, a part that jumps in to save the day, right? It's kind of related to the caretaker, right? But it's got a different flavor, right? It's got a different flavor. And it could be the savior or the martyr, right? The dictator, right? The dictator. How many of you, when things get uncertain, turn into the dictator, where suddenly you're barking orders at everyone all around you, telling your kids to do exactly what you want them to do, telling your spouse to do exactly what? How many of you become a dictator, right? And try and control everything in your environment? The stockpiler. Oh boy, right? Have enough toilet paper? Right? The stockpiler over prepares for the crisis. The stockpiler over prepares for the crisis. And this is really, I had that part triggered one time Well, and it was triggered by scarcity, right? When people started, like all the toilet paper started to disappear, I started to come out of my like positive perspective kind of denial parts and started to realize like, oh, this really is horrible what we're dealing with. And I had a part that I remember it was a couple hours where I was really afraid, and I was like, oh my God, we've got to get to the store and we've got to get everything that we need. And luckily, when we went to the store, everything was so normal there that I'm blended from that part. I was like, oh no, I don't need to stockpile. The accountant, a part of you that starts to analyze and track everything. Starts to analyze and track everything. The lookout, right? The lookout is scanning the environment for danger, right? The lookout, you know, hypervigilant, scanning the environment for danger. The burrower, right? How many of you want to go hide under your sheets in your bed? Want to burrow? This is the head in the sand, right? But it usually involves burrowing into something. The minimizer, right? The minimizer downplays the danger or importance, right? I tend towards that, and I did in the beginning of the pandemic. I had a minimizing part that wanted to soothe my own fear by minimizing what was happening in some way. Of course, what happens with the minimizer is because you're not really seeing the situation rationally, right? You're minimizing it. You possibly end up doing less than you need to, right? Again, the centered self looks at the fear and reacts in a grounded, realistic way. The minimizer is trying to downplay the danger or importance of what's happening. The cloud gazer, right? How many of us started putting out like, oh, this is the silver lining, you know, this is the this, we should all be grateful to the, you know, songs went out about gratitude to the virus, right? And to a lot of us, that those things were not, we weren't feeling that way at all, right? The cloud gazer tries to reframe the situation as a positive, right? Tries to reframe the situation as a positive. Then you had the denier, right? There's a lot of people in denial right now still, though that seems to be going away, right? Just denying that anything is wrong. Then there's the paranoiac, right? A part of you that starts to research and make up conspiracy theories and stories, right? I have a few friends who are in that place with the pandemic, and I don't tend to run that way at all. So I just, you know, I just notice people's parts, right? And then the exterminator, a part of you that just wants to eradicate the problem through force. Wants to eradicate the problem through force. And then, of course, the indulger, right? Which all of us in Bright Line Eating know, because that's the part of us that wants to distract or numb by eating, right? These are 15 archetypes. And just notice which of these parts show up for you. And again, our parts are trying to help us. Each of these parts has a really beautiful, wonderful intention that you can get to know. And a lot of these parts that if you're dealing with the crisis from this part are going to make it worse somehow for you. So I'm just going to go through a couple of these in detail so you can get a sense of it. And I think in each of the presentation, I'm going to go through a different set in detail. So I'm going to start with the horribilizer. So this fear response part assumes the worst. It will lead you to think things are worse than they actually are. There's a lot of gloom and doom in this part's worldview. How is this part protecting you? What is the impact? By exaggerating the danger trouble, the part prompts you to prepare and take actions to help yourself. The reverse also can be true. This part could cause you to become frozen and hide from the world. This also can buy you some time to adjust mentally and emotionally to the fear-producing situation. What do you do instead if you notice the horribilizer? Take a breath and come back to your center. That is always the first thing we do when we realize we've lost our center. We take a breath and come back to our center. We feel our body. Sometimes just literally touching ourselves and feeling ourselves with our fingers will bring us out of the mind and bring us into the body. The centered self does not panic. The centered self stays clear and calm, taking the needed actions to meet the situation on hand. The isolator. This fear response part withdraws from contact with others. It may do this physically by avoiding actual contact or emotionally by being aloof, silent, or otherwise unknowable. How is this part protecting you? What is the impact? By withdrawing, this part protects you from others' judgment, intrusion, and violation of your boundaries. The isolator's need for a safe distance interferes with your ability to connect with others and receive their support. What to do instead when you notice your isolator? Again, take a breath and come back to your centered. The centered self recognizes the strength in connection with others. Calm your mind, get into your body, and reach out to others in your circle of friends, family, and community. This is one of the most, reaching out for support can change things instantly. The caretaker. This fear response part distracts from its own fear by taking care of others in a codependent way rather than an interdependent way of relating to others. The connections here may be quite superficial, a one-way process of caring that allows you to ignore your own needs. So many people in the helping professions that are so burned out taking care of others that they don't take care of themselves. How is this part protecting you? What is the impact? By ignoring your own needs and instead of focusing on others, this part definitely blocks you from dealing with the situation at hand. By staying focused on caring for others, this part allows you to stop growing and solving your own problems. What to do instead? Take a breath and come back to your center. Do that in this moment. Just take a breath and come back to your centered. The centered self recognizes the need for self-care. Most people experience burnout or resentment if their lives revolve around caring for someone else. Check in with yourself, recognize your own needs, and set boundaries so that you can spend some of your energy on caring for yourself and recharging. The hero. I so relate to this when I saw the hero. Similar to the caretaker, this part activates to focus on helping others. While this may seem valorous and admirable, but many people don't need or even want to be saved. So true. Ever had someone try and save you when you don't need to be saved or want to be saved? It's really annoying. The hero part can also focus on martyrdom, allowing yourself to be harmed emotionally, mentally, or physically in efforts to save others. How is this part protecting you? What is the impact? Like the caretaker, the hero focuses on saving others rather than yourself. This can cause resentment between this part and those who don't want to be saved or who don't show appreciation. It also distracts from self-care and realistic, clear thinking. What to do instead? Take a breath and come back to your center. The centered self is courageous and compassionate, but that also means letting others care for themselves or fight their own battles. If you want to help someone, ask what they need or how you can support them. Do not avoid helping yourself during scary times. The dictator. As the title implies, this part is very controlling. It's often a perfectionist, controlling your choices and actions. It usually tries to control others as well, telling them what to do, what not to do, and how to be. Those who are very judgmental of others are almost always very judgmental of themselves also. Like all dictators, this part believes it can succeed best by having a totalitarian control of you and those around you. It's one strategy for staying safe or even happy during fearful times. But like all dictators, we want to rebel against this iron-fisted control. The reality is simple. No one can truly control anyone else. What to do instead? Take a breath and come back to your center. The centered self is confident and courageous enough to let others make their own choices and to risk not having all the right answers. The centered self is connected to others, open to listening to their experiences. When we are centered, we're also creative enough to solve problems without becoming tyrants. And then this is the last one I'll read in detail for this talk. I'll go through the other ones in the other webinars. The stockpiler. The stockpiler. I have my own version of this. This part over-prepares for crisis. The stockpiler often hoards resources such as food, money, or even guns and toilet paper. This part doesn't feel it's possible to have enough when the resource is needed. How is this part protecting you? What is the impact? By over-preparing, this part wants to buy peace of mind for when things get worse. The part believes that over-preparing now will make for an easier time later. Unfortunately, the stockpiler's resources aren't that hard to come by, and this effort on preparing resources distracts from other ways of preparing or dealing with problems. What to do instead? Take a breath. Come back to center. The centered self is calm and clear enough to discern what's needed from what isn't. The centered self is connected enough to share resources, receiving needed support as well as giving it. So parts trigger parts. You know, one of the things also that Dick Schwartz discovered when he started to realize that people had parts inside of them is that our parts are kind of in a family system. Our parts are relating to each other. Sometimes parts are polarized with each other. They fight against each other. Like many of us know that feeling of the food controller fighting the food indulger. And in this particular scenario, many times these crisis response parts will trigger other parts. Like parts can generate more fear and overwhelm, right? They can magnify the fear and trigger other parts. Like Susan had a horribilizer that would then trigger her burrower, right? I think that if I'm kind of seeing based on what she said, right? The horribilizer would build things up to a point where it just felt overwhelming, and then the burrower would be like, okay, I'm burrowing under the covers, right? And again, now that you're starting to be able to discern, like you can start to see what are the relationships between those parts. You know, you might have noticed 3 or 4 of those parts that get activated. And some of them actually activate the other ones. And again, recognition is liberation, right? You could pull out a piece of paper. You could map out your crisis response parts. You could look and see which parts trigger which parts. And in that process, allow yourself to come back to your centered self so you can see the cycle happening and intervene. The so the other thing about parts is we usually feel our parts in our body, right? And some of the places you might feel fear in your body are your chest, including sensations in the heart and outside of it, your throat, including tightness, your lungs, including shortness of breath, your abdomen, including stomach aches or diarrhea, your head, including headaches, jaw pain, teeth grinding, confusion, or a fuzzy feeling, the sex organs, including a drive to have sex or release stress or numb out, the arms and hands, including tingling or the urge to touch and hold others. The thing that's useful about noticing that you feel your emotions in your body is it's another way of noticing that you're leaving the centered self, right? You're leaving the centered self. You can focus on these different sensations, and many times one of the ways we connect to our parts is by focusing on where that part shows up in the body as a sensation. So that's something else that you'll learn when you learn about parts work. When we're being controlled by these parts, our protective parts, rather than our centered self, this is what we lose. There's a loss of self-care. We make unhealthy choices. There's a loss of concentration and clarity. There's a loss of peace, agitation when peace is available, a loss of sobriety when sobriety has been fought for, a loss of possibility. A brighter future is never attempted or imagined. And for some of us, it can be also a loss of our bright lines. As we move further into overwhelm and start to get caught up in a cascade of these protective parts, our lines can start to get wonky and even fall away completely. So what do we do now, right? So this was a wonderful illustration of how we can take parts work and apply it to a particular issue, right? What I've done is I've taken parts work and applied it to how do we move through crisis. So sometimes recognition is liberation, right? Sometimes literally, I know there will be probably quite a large number of people that are on this webinar who are going to hear their crisis response part in that list when I went over it. And it's going to give them a crucial insight that's going to allow them to react differently the next time they notice that part is there. Literally, recognition is liberation. Knowing what is happening internally and how to intervene are the beginnings of centering yourself. In parts work, familiarity is strength. Building a relationship with these parts help for quicker recognition and intervention when they activate. That's kind of what the parts work process is we go into an experience of the parts and we start to build an internal relationship with them. And then connection is support. We're not in this alone. Parts may try to keep us isolated, but by reaching out, we gain much needed support. So that's the end of the slides, and I wanted to do one more thing with you, which was I want to do, this is just going to be a very brief experiential exercise. And if for some reason this doesn't work for you, or it feels like it might even be too triggering, please don't do it. You might have an intuition about that. But I'm just going to guide you through a simple process of getting to know one of those parts that I listed. And so you can have a little bit of a sense of what the process of parts work is about. And always when I do something like this with a group, it won't necessarily resonate for everyone. Just kind of do the best that you can with it. And so you can understand a little bit more about parts work. But what I want to invite you to do, if you're able, is close your eyes for a moment, take a breath, and choose one of those parts from that list. Maybe it was the caretaker that stood out for you, or the burrower. Just choose one of those parts from that list and see if you can go back in your memory to a specific time when that part was activated. It might be activated right now. A lot of us have a lot of parts that are activated right now, but just go back to your memory and don't pick something horribly traumatic. Just, you know, some probably some way that you've been reacting to the pandemic. And when you go back to it in your memory, see if you can just notice how it shows up in your body as a sensation. If it does, not everyone will be able to sense their parts in their body, but just see if you can notice, like, where is this part at in your body? And just bring your awareness to that sensation. Or if you don't have a sensation, just focus for a moment on the fear part, what I'm calling the crisis response part, protector. And I want you to do something imaginative, which is to allow an image to form of this part in your mind's eye. Allow an image to form. And if one doesn't spontaneously form, a lot of the names are kind of invoke images, right? So maybe you've already kind of have an image of this part. But if one doesn't just naturally evolve, just create one. Like you had a little Etch-a-Sketch right now in your mind's eye, and you could draw this part. And the part could look like a person, could look like a cartoon, or it could be an object. And then I want you to imagine moving the part out of your body to about 6 feet in front of you, where you can even see it more clearly in your mind's eye. And again, if this isn't kind of working for you, just kind of ride along with it. And if it is, go with what's happening organically. And I want you to notice, how do you feel towards that image? How do you feel towards that image? And if you have a negative feeling, like you don't like it, you wish it would go away, what I'm going to ask you to do is just see if you can release that negative feeling and allow yourself to lean into some openness and curiosity towards the part. Some openness and curiosity, because this is a very important part of your protective system. And you should be curious about it, right? And then just simply ask the part how it's trying to help you. And don't think about the answer or analyze the answer, but just simply notice what comes to you. Just listen and notice what comes to you. Ask the part, how are you trying to help me? And just notice what it says. And if it doesn't say anything, don't worry about it. Just be with it. Ask the part how old it thinks you are. And if it thinks that you're younger than you are, right? Because many times our protective parts think we're children still. I want you to take a moment and tell that part that you're an adult now. And just show that part your adult self. Say, hey, I'm not a child anymore. I'm an adult now. And if you're able, thank the part for trying to help, right? This is one of your crisis response parts, right? This part jumps into action when it feels like there's an emergency. So just thank the part. And tell this part that since you're not a child, you're an adult, that you really feel that you can actually handle these situations from your centered adult self. Just tell the part, hey, I want you to see that I'm an adult so that you don't feel like you have to jump in during an emergency. I am really able to do what needs to be done from my center. This is parts work. This is the beginning of it, right? We're starting to externalize this part. We're starting to build a dialogue, a relationship with it. We're starting to gain deeper insights into what's going on when this part gets activated. And we're letting this part know that, hey, I'm an adult now. I want to handle things from my centered self. And again, thank this part for its positive intentions. We're not trying to get rid of parts in IFS and parts work. We're just trying to bring them back into balance. You know, we love our parts are important. And now that, ask this part also, what's its name? Susan's part had kind of a cute name. I'll let her talk about that. Ask her what its name is. And maybe it'll tell you, maybe it won't. Maybe you can name the part. And then thank the part. Just send some loving attention to this part of yourself, because it's probably been working overtime right now in your life. Again, letting this part know, hey, I want to respond from my centered self. I want to help you do the work. And then if you're sitting with your eyes closed, I want to invite you to open your eyes. And then I'm going to bring Susan back on. Or she's going to bring her back on.
I
There she
am. I'm
is.
right here. My little guy was named Eustace.
That's right.
Eustace. It's another name from the Chronicles of Narnia. I named myself Susan from the Chronicles of Narnia. Quite the fan. I forget who Eustace was. I think he was a little bugger of a lame-o from, I don't know, whatever. Anyway. Yeah. I did for that meditation. Thanks for that meditation, Everett. I did my Burrower, and he's like he's sort of like a porcupine upside down, but he's like under a shell kind. I don't know if the mammalian if it all actually works. I don't think porcupines would actually do this, but he's like it's underground, right, under a shell, kind of a little person. Right. He's like, oh, and I told him, like, I got this, but really I think he's onto something. Like, I sometimes think crawling into bed is the right thing to do. So I was sort of like, we'll just, you and I, dude, we'll just work together, right? Like, you feel free to let me know if you feel like,
bunny slippers, right? That's where bunny slippers comes from, right?
Blogs on this stuff. Just go to bed sometimes.
Just go to bed.
Best strategy. Totally. All right. So, thank you for that, Everett. Thank you. And I'm sure so many people related to many of those parts.
Right. Yeah, I know I did.
Totally. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen again, and I want to talk about the neuroscience of all this. Like, what's going on in our brains? What's going on in our brains, and how do our brains give rise to these parts that Everett's talking about? That is not the slide. That, I don't know what you're seeing, but okay. Anxious brain, centered brain. So, yeah. A lot of what I'm going to share here comes right from this brilliant book I just picked up. David found it and didn't read it, but brought it into our house. And I picked it up one day. I was like, oh, this looks really interesting. What is this? And yeah, Loretta Bruning, professor at Cal State East Bay. She's retired now, professor emerita. But I believe she has a PhD in neuroscience. And yeah, she wrote this brilliant book. Now, we've been talking about anxious parts, fearful parts, anxious parts, and those are emotions. And Everett's been talking about the parts. And I was talking about how, from the perspective of neuroscience, it is actually literally true that consciousness is divided into separable systems that arise in an ebb and flow in the brain. And I want to talk about how that actually works. And to really conceptualize what I'm about to talk about here, we need to go back to the fact that human beings are mammals, right? I don't think these guys are mammals, but this dude's a mammal, we're mammals. And we're also going to talk about, reptiles and amphibians, a little bit about how the brain evolved and how it's organized. And we're going to talk about brain parts a little bit. So you've probably heard of the cortex. And the cortex is the outer part of the brain, the part that's richly folded on the outside of the brain. And it's the part that human beings have a lot of, right? It's really what distinguishes us primarily from other animals. And these huge number of extra neurons we have, they store our life experience. So long-term memories are stored here. Memories are not generated in the cortex, but they're stored. They migrate out to the cortex over a period of literally often years, and then get stored out there. And the neurons in the cortex, grow and interconnect and form these rich pathways called fiber tracts that in sum total make us who we are through our own experience. Now, deeper inside is the limbic system, which is, the term limbic system was someone was analyzing the brain way before, anybody knew anything really. And just sort of was all this stuff in here, we'll call this the limbic system. And it turned out to be, part of, all of the amygdala, part of the hippocampus, but not all of it, but it can be a helpful term still, even though the history of the term is it referred to a fuzzy, nebulous area that actually includes a bunch of different structures. When you learn about the limbic system in biology, the textbook might say something like memory and emotion or something like that. And indeed, the hippocampus is what makes your memories. This is the memory factory here. The memories are then stored later in the cortex, but this is the memory factory. If the hippocampus is damaged, it creates the type of condition that is popularized in films like Memento or 50 First Dates or something like that, where someone can't make new memories. The hypothalamus controls eating and sex, and connects to the pituitary gland, which is going to govern our endocrine system. So all our hormones are released there. And the amygdala we literally think of as fear, fear. The amygdala is the threat alert system. So our amygdalae, I guess it would be, are on high alert right now. The amygdalas are working overtime. And then deeper below that, literally down in the brain, you've got the cerebellum and the brainstem and the medulla oblongata and the pons, which we're not talking about that right now. But this is often called the reptilian brain, and it manages routine bodily functions and just makes sure they happen, swallowing and producing urine and stuff like that. But it also has something to do with eating, like making sure that you're eating and don't choke, and just making sure it's happening, and heart beating and all that stuff. So if all this stuff is hopelessly damaged, but this stuff is still working, you're in like a persistent vegetative state, right? Like the body is still functioning. Your pupils will still dilate, blah, 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 but you're gone, right? All this stuff is gone. So those are the brain parts. And if you look at them among different creatures, you see this huge cortex. Like the reptilian brain hasn't really changed that much. The cerebellum, the brainstem, they've gotten bigger for sure. The limbic system's gotten bigger, but it's really the cortex that has gotten quite large. But our brains, I mean, I'm sure you've heard the quip that, we have 98% of the same genes as a chimpanzee, right? Which is a shocking truth, right? It's amazing that the differences that we see between humans and chimpanzees can really be captured by so few genes, but it's true. The structures that we have in our brain are shared with these other animals. And so it's really important to keep in mind what the brain is after. Like, what's it focused on? And the reality is it's focused on surviving. Like, grocery stores didn't used to exist. I know we're all grumpy about our grocery stores right now, but they are, even now, they are a blessing. They are a luxury. Survival used to be really, really hard. And so what the brain wants is it wants to make sure we stay alive. It evolved to scan for threats and incentivize immediate actions to overcome those threats. Like, the brain's job is to be an alarmist, alarm-sounding system. Because if you think about what it actually took to stay alive in these days, if you were kind of sitting on your duff all spring and summer and fall, you wouldn't survive winter. Like, the people who did that didn't have any kids. And they're none of our ancestors, because the people who sat on their duff all spring and summer and fall and never thought, you know what? It gets cold around here in the winter. I better prepare. I better stockpile a bunch of food. I better look out for my future self, right? Those guys didn't live. So the ones that lived were the ones that were making up threats and scanning the immediate environment for threats. And as soon as they finished one little project to solve one survival need, started scanning for yet more threats. That is the way the brain evolved. And so at the level of the neurotransmitter, what we've got on hand in our brains is literally a chemical seesaw, where the threat system, which has this hormone cortisol going on, is counterbalanced by all these other happy chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphin, that basically signify that we've succeeded in moving towards something that meets a survival need. And then the cortisol lightens off a little bit. Like, oh, good. Whew, you're handling it. That is the chemical seesaw that we are all subject to. And then, of course, when something happens, like my bad days, right? The cortisol is going nuts. And then I would have a good day. I get enough sleep, and I'd, do all the things I needed to do, make some phone calls, take care of myself. I released a bunch of happy chemicals, had a good day, had a bad day. This is the chemical seesaw that I was involved in. And it's all about these neurotransmitters and these, neuropeptides. So some molecules serve the role of both hormones and neurotransmitters that are called neuropeptides. Doesn't matter. We're not going into that much detail right now. But I want you to meet your happy chemicals, the ones that counterbalance the cortisol, because the cortisol is the stress hormone and it's forcing you to take action. in some kind of way. And these are your options. So you can do something that's going to release some dopamine, which produces the joy of finding things that meet your needs. The eureka, I got it feeling, or like, yes, I'm making progress toward this worthy goal. That's when dopamine is released. Either we've procured something that is really exciting to the brain, usually sex or food, basically, or we're like on track, we're on path. Serotonin produces the feeling of being respected by others, which you could maybe call pride or something like that. Like feeling a part of, feeling like you have some social status. I don't know if you've heard me talk about how clear I am that I like social status really matters to me. This is the serotonin system, right? I don't know if other people like admit that, right? But we're wired that way. We're wired that way for social status to matter. And you can see why, right? Like not belonging to the group was potentially fatal. The people who didn't care about that at all, they didn't live long enough to reproduce either, right? Because you can imagine how difficult it would be to survive, for several years as an adult or as a kid if you didn't care at all about belonging to the collective, right? Oxytocin produces the feeling of being safe with others, now called bonding. It makes you trust others. It also makes you more attuned to who is trustworthy. So it doesn't make you trust blindly. It actually sharpens your attunement to whom you should trust. Oxytocin is released in huge doses during sex. It's released in huge doses during lactation. It's released in smaller doses during touch or cuddling. It's released significantly when someone trusts you with something, like lends you money or invites you into their home or something like that. It's released a little bit when someone smiles at you. It's a human connection molecule. And endorphin produces oblivion that masks pain, often called euphoria. Endorphin is released so that you can persevere. It's the molecule that says we can keep going for a little bit longer. And yeah, it produces a little bit of euphoria that masks what's challenging about perseverance. Now, you might be thinking, I don't know if you are or not, but maybe that kind of applies. I'm not sure fully. What I want you to do is keep in mind that the limbic system has no language. These chemicals are working without words. And they're producing motives and they're producing feelings. But we all have our own sort of languaging of that. But I also want you to consider that you might feel that way deep down, actually for real, more than you realize. That might also be true too. So 4 happy chemicals. Dopamine, the joy of finding what you seek. Serotonin, the security of social importance. Oxytocin, the comfort of social alliances and togetherness. And endorphin, the oblivion that masks pain and allows you to keep going. So dopamine is seeking rewards. Serotonin is getting respect from others. Oxytocin is building social alliances. And endorphin is ignoring physical pain. So each chemical has a job. Dopamine is motivating you to get what you need, even when it takes a lot of effort. Getting enough food consistently takes a lot of effort. We got to eat a lot. I mean, I know that a lot of us maybe wish we got to eat more, but the reality is it takes a lot of food, right? Like pounds of food a day to keep a human being alive. And if you think about what conditions used to be like, that required a relentless quest, right? Doing what it takes to procreate also takes a lot of effort, a lot of effort and a lot of drama and negatives that go along with it, right? Like, but you got to persevere. It matters. It matters that you have sex and have babies. It matters. So dopamine motivates you to get what you need, even when it takes a lot of effort. It is the search, and it is the search hormone. It's a neurotransmitter, rather. It's the neurotransmitter that says more, like need more, like, yeah, it's like the neurotransmitter of pursuit. People talk about it as pleasure. It's not really pleasure. What it feels like is more. Serotonin motivates you to get respect, motivates you to belong, motivates you to be seen well in the eyes of others, which expands your mating opportunities and protects your offspring. Oxytocin motivates you to trust others, to find safety and companionship, to bond with others. Endorphin motivates you to ignore pain so you can escape from harm when you're injured. So let's talk about how this works in real life. So all throughout the day, the cortex looks for patterns that match things that you've experienced in the past. You call them cues, triggers, circumstances, things in the environment, whatever. And then the limbic system releases chemicals that say, oh, we've seen this before. This is, oh, excuse me, I have the hiccups all of a sudden. That's not good. The limbic system says, this is good for you, go toward it, or this is bad for you, avoid it. And the limbic system does that with chemicals, right? You can guess which ones this is good for you, go toward it are, right? That's your dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, or endorphin. This is bad for you, avoid it. That's going to be cortisol, your stress hormone, your fear hormone. Now, the limbic system is gonna say, this is good for you, go toward it or avoid it. But the limbic system doesn't get the final say. You don't always act on these chemicals that the limbic system is releasing because the cortex can override the limbic system. The cortex can say, nope, we just started bright line eating. We are not eating right now. It's the middle of the afternoon. We've had lunch. We haven't had dinner yet. We are not eating right now. So the cortex can override the limbic system and suggest an alternative, right? How about we not eat right now? Let's drink a big glass of water instead. And then the limbic system is going to react to that idea. In this case, the limbic system likes it and accepts that idea. It might be that the limbic system issues back a stronger suggestion. And this might be basically the setup. This would be the food indulger. The limbic system wants that food to feel better. There's too much cortisol around, and the limbic system is saying, no, we really need to eat. And the cortex, our executive control center, our decision making, our rational brain, if you will, is saying, no, we're not going to eat that food. And now we have a war between the food controller and the food indulger. So it's the limbic system that sparks an action. Go eat some food. It's the cortex, though, that carries out the action. Again, the cortex can override the limbic system, and in part because it's the cortex that has motor cortex, like what actually moves your arm to bend the elbow and actually eat the food. That's motor cortex. That's in the cortex. But the decision maker is actually deep in the limbic system. So basically it's this loop. And unfortunately, the decision-making system is in the part of the basal ganglia called the nucleus accumbens, which is challenging because that's exactly where our addictions lie, right? So this is why addictions can be so persnickety, is because they live right in the area where alternatives are no, the cortex suggests the alternatives. The limbic system is like the bouncer in the club that lets some in and keeps others out. So the the area that's actually like kind of deciding what options are up for evaluation is in the addictive centers of the brain, which is really tough, which is why sometimes when we're really consumed by an addiction, the whole world falls away and it feels like there's only one option, right? You've got to pick up right then. You've got to use, you've got to get your fix. You've got to, whatever it is, eat or smoke or drink or whatever, right? But there's this constant interplay between the motor cortex and the limbic system in action execution. And it really is a push-pull. This is why the parts work perspective is so helpful, because it can identify the sort of psychology of these battles that get set up between these different parts of the brain. Okay, now you always have to remember the point of this, right? Your brain has some quirks. It evolved in a particular way. It cares for the survival of your genes as urgently as it cares for your body, for anything else. It matters to the brain that you stay alive. It's going to keep scanning for those threats, and it's going to keep proposing options that it thinks will help you solve those problems. And also, the brain wires significantly, like prior to the age of 7. It wires a lot from early experience. Though that's, of course, an imperfect guide to adult survival. So we have our brains suggesting all kinds of things to us urgently as if they're truth, when, really that just comes from a very old pattern, which is another reason that parts work is so helpful, right? To find, and ultimately in the deepest parts work, you find those deep wounded parts and you heal them. You heal them. You totally transform them. Now, it sure would be nice to just stop cortisol with permanent solutions to every problem. Like, wouldn't that be nice if we just got the right happy chemical mix? We scanned the environment, saw all the problems, and just solved it already, right? And just moved to utopia. That would be awesome. Unfortunately, that can't happen because all kinds of things trigger cortisol, including disappointment. So, you're doing bright line eating and you take your list to the grocery store and then you arrive to find bare shelves and they don't have soy sauce today and they don't have, all the things you're looking for today, right? Is just one current example. But basically, your cortisol helps you make course corrections on the path to meeting your needs and staying alive. Like, the reality is that first alternatives don't always work, and we often need to course correct. I mean, welcome to life, right? There is no straight path between point A and point B. It's always a circuitous, you never get to fly as the crow flies, right? It's a windy road, this thing called life. And cortisol is right there to say, hey, we might be off course. And that's its job. You actually wouldn't want cortisol to stop doing that. You really wouldn't. You really wouldn't. It's necessary, right? In the same way that there's no such thing as getting rid of all parts, right? We all have parts. It's a matter of like noticing when really challenging ones are coming up and, having strategies for coming back to center, and also being able to work with our parts to just keep growing. It's just an endless process, right? So cortisol is needed. It is. It alerts you when plan A doesn't work. It's got to do its job. It's going to come up if there's something scary or disappointing or that doesn't seem quite according to plan or whatever. But there's more bad news, actually, because even when plan A does work, alas, the happy chemicals don't last. They really don't last hardly at all. To get more, you have to do more. And this is, of course, the problem with just eating as a solution to this stuff. This is how a brain keeps convincing a body to do what it takes to stay alive. You got to keep going, dude. Yes, you've, jarred one jar of tomatoes. That's not going to get you through winter. There's still more threat there. The stockpiler's in effect and we got to make it through this winter. So keep going. Keep going. So even when plan A works, the happy chemicals don't last. Here's how this works. The happy chemicals get reabsorbed. And as soon as they're reabsorbed, your awareness of all the threats, the potential threats, the real threats in your environment, your awareness of all those comes back. So basically, this is a synapse. These are nerve cells in the brain, neurons. And at the end of the synapse, Neurotransmitters, this is dopamine, this is serotonin, etc., right? They get released right here and they're communicating here, receptors, and then this next cell is going to be impacted. This is how communication works in the brain. What happens is, within a tiny fraction, like just a little bit of time, these neurotransmitters just get reabsorbed through transporters, put back into the synaptic vesicles, and they're ready to be released next time. So basically, actions need to be happening. Otherwise, those happy chemicals stop, And the brain has its moments of calm and peace, but in general, the brain is always on the go. Meditate much? Am I wrong? The brain is always on the go. Like the moments of presence and stillness are far outnumbered by the moments of thoughts and happenings in the brain, right? It's just the way it works. So we're in a constant dance trying to keep the happy chemical ratio in our favor. So the bottom line is that the brain, in particular, the limbic system, gives you a kick with a do something feeling, like you got to do something when you're not distracted by happy chemicals. Okay, so as soon as the cortisol gets outpaces your happy chemicals, the brain gets agitated and it wants you to do something about that. Like, this situation is too threatening. Like, we're not okay. You got to do something. And that is the brain's way of just, God bless it, trying to keep you alive. You know what I mean? It just says the environment's threatening right now. So, this is the cycle that we're in where, there's this great quote, right? Everything I like is either immoral, illegal, or fattening, right? Because everything that triggers happy chemicals has side effects. Basically, anything taken to an extreme will prove problematic. And I'm probably preaching to the choir here. You know this. Anything taken to an extreme will prove problematic. Now, the good news is that lots of healthy things trigger happy chemicals too. Meditating triggers happy chemicals. Exercise triggers all kinds, like this dude here, right? Endorphin, serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine. This guy's getting the fourfold flood into his brain with a game of pickup basketball with his friends. All four of them. Where's the dopamine coming from? Dopamine's released when we pursue and achieve rewards, right? Like goals. So every time he sees a situation where he might, make a move and make a layup and then starts toward that, some dopamine is released. Serotonin, he's like basking in the camaraderie with his friends. Oxytocin, there's some smiling and some touch and some bonding happening here. And endorphin, he's getting an exercise high from doing this, right? He's going to leave this afternoon in the sunshine feeling awesome. This situation right here, right? Huge oxytocin flood. Some serotonin also, like maybe she has a partner who's like stoked that she just got the baby to sleep. So some serotonin is probably being released right here. Some dopamine, she might have had like a little goal in mind that if we can get this baby to bed, then maybe my partner and I can sit down and watch an episode of our favorite Netflix show. So she just probably triggered some dopamine by getting that baby to sleep, right? Can you see it? And it's possible that if she just breastfed, there was some pain involved and she got some endorphin released as well. So she might have gotten the fourfold trifecta there too. Trifecta's 3, but you know what I mean. Okay. So in the right rhythm and proportion, a beautiful life filled with ample happy chemicals can be built. What we're trying to avoid is the vicious circle. Now, my dad, love him to death, is a philosophy buff, and he schooled me a long time ago that it's not vicious cycle, it's a vicious circle. Like, it is a thing in philosophy, the vicious circle, and it's a thing you learn. So, okay, Dad, nod to you. I didn't get it wrong. It's not vicious cycle, it's a vicious circle. So the vicious circle is, for example, eating too much food or unhealthy food to get that hit of dopamine. I mean, honestly, right now, it's probably the easiest thing, right? I mean, unless you got like a partner who's always wanting to have sex with you, that's maybe easy too. I don't know what your circumstances are, but food is easy, right? It's just an available dopamine hit all the time. And with all this excess of, let me just tell a story here, right, real quick. Do you know James Hefke? I've featured him in a couple of vlogs. He's 28 years old. He started Brightline Eating over the summer, in the late summer, I believe, at 372 pounds. And I interviewed him for the vlog a couple times. He's like closing in on 200 and something pounds, top 200s. I don't know if he's gotten there yet. He might still be 30 something. The blazer that he was wearing in the first vlog, he just sent me a picture of himself holding up this old wrinkled blazer. It was what he was wearing in the first vlog, and it's like he's swimming in it. He's doing so great. He texted me the other day. I'm going to get out my phone, and I'm going to tell you what he said. James Hefke texted me the other day, and he said, "Hi, smiley face. I want to see if you can talk at some point. I know you're busy, and it wouldn't be long. I've had lots of food thoughts the past couple of days. I would just love to hear your experience on it." I called him, and he said, "Yeah, I'm nowhere near giving in. My bright lines are strong. But like, I'm not used to having food thoughts. I used to have no food thoughts, and suddenly I'm having food thoughts." And I'm like, he said, I'm like, I'm concerned. I don't want to ever eat again addictively. Like, what do you think, Dr. T? And I said, you know what, dude? Like, of course you are. Of course you are. Basically, what's happening right now is your cortisol is higher than you previously had known in your Brightline Eating journey, right? We're in a coronavirus pandemic. We're suddenly in shelter-in-place lockdown in New York. James lives here in Rochester with me, like near, I don't know where he lives. I think he lives way on the other side of town. Anyway, of course you are, dude. We're in New York. Cases are, everyone knows. I don't need to go through the reasons why James's cortisol would be up. We all know. And I was like, so your previously quiet brain is experiencing, remember, I'm not going to flip back to it, but remember the seesaw slide where there's the seesaw between cortisol and the happy chemicals. Cortisol's gotten bigger. It's winning that seesaw. It is big right now. And I'm like, so James, just think, your brain is basically saying to you, are you sure? Like, really, are you sure that you don't want to just eat something a little more, some NMF maybe? Because like, we need some help here. Like, we don't have enough happy chemicals on board to handle this much cortisol. Like, there are threats, and we got to do something to like handle these threats. So if he were to give in, now he didn't, he's doing great. But let's imagine that we eat too much food or some unhealthy food, some NMF, right? To get that dopamine relief. Well, it gets reabsorbed. And once the dopamine subsides, then your awareness of just having eaten too much becomes your next immediate threat. Literally, your brain is scanning for threats, and it's like, oh, I just ate. I do Brightline Eating, and I just ate. It's a threat. Like, what do we do about that? Cortisol is released with that shame, that disappointment, that frustration, that fear. And now your cortisol goes up. And if your next best strategy is to eat more, now you're trapped in a vicious circle. You see it? It's basically a cortisol dopamine ping pong match, and eating more is the ball going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You're the loser in that game. And for a lot of us, this is a shame spiral, right? It's like the part of us that, we probably have a constellation of parts that flip out when we eat, right? A shame part, maybe a screeching controller manager part, like a inner critic-y manager part, like, you weren't supposed to do that. You're supposed to be doing Brightline Eating. You just blew it. Blah, 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 blah. This is never going to work for you. You're not one of the ones it's working for. Blah, blah. Whatever those parts are, they're releasing a ton of cortisol. And one of the ways to combat that is to eat more food. And now you're stuck in a shame spiral. Now, the big challenge is we need food for survival, right? So food is hardwired in. Like, we're not getting away from the food thing. But the foods that are available, right? I'm going to take away that picture of NMF. They release way too much dopamine. So they're just such an easy fix for the stress, right? So the reality is that we've got to build new pathways. New pathways. I often talk about the fiber tracts in our brain as rivers, and it's like water flowing over land, and it grooves a river. I'm going to give a different analogy today of a dense rainforest. A dense rainforest. Starting bright line eating is like trying to walk in a jungle that looks like this. Having been doing bright line eating for a while, now we're talking, you see people online posting, like day 1000, maintenance for 2 years, feeling great, whatever, right? Like, that's walking in a jungle that looks like this. Those people have grooved new pathways. On day 1, though, what you're doing is you're taking a machete. Like, you're trying to create happy chemicals where your brain doesn't have any pre-existing fiber tracks to say, yes, you can get a reward this way. But you've got to just do it. Your brain may or may not even think it's that rewarding. I don't know about this whole online community thing. I don't really know about this call a buddy thing, this commit your food thing, this write your food down the night before thing. I don't know about that. Yeah, grab a machete, start hacking a path, and then the next day hack back, and then the next day hack back. And what you do is you train your brain like, oh yeah, you can get some serotonin that way. Post in the community and see all the responses you get. Post, I feel like hell and I want to eat. I can't handle this day. See what happens and see your serotonin go up. You can even get some oxytocin that way, right? You can write down your food the night before with a day 1 at the top. And then the next day, when you're writing down your journal and you get to write day 2, that's a surge of dopamine right there. That's the boom, I just achieved that, right? And over time, you start to groove a new pathway with happy chemicals doing other stuff. So the answer basically is to build a new brain by creating brand new paths. Showing your brain how you can get happy chemicals in a balanced way. Now, if you've been reading people online who've been saying things like, I'm so loving my bright line eating program right now. It's saving me. It's sanity. I'm feeling good. I'm doing good. There's craziness out there, but thank God I have my bright line eating program and it's just my foundation. Maybe you are one of those people. If so, I'm giving you a fist bump right now. Woo woo. Those people built a new brain a while ago already. They're still building it every day. And they have a pattern of living now with habits in the morning that release dopamine, probably some serotonin too, habits in the evening that produce dopamine, and all through the day they get some serotonin and some oxytocin from their bright line eating connections, and they probably go for brisk walks and get some endorphin. Like, they have a pattern of living now that is releasing enough happy chemicals that they're supported, and their cortisol even now isn't overpowering. And but they might have experienced the whisper, like, are you sure you don't want to eat? Like, because there's a lot of extra cortisol around right now. But luckily their brain is so healed that are you sure you don't want to eat, it's a threadbare thought that they can push away, right? If you've gone back to dipping into the dopamine that you get so abundantly and readily by some food, well, then you have a brain that's suggesting that all the time now, and maybe you're in the ditch. Maybe you're full on in the ditch, which would make a lot of sense, And I've been there. I've been full on in the ditch in the last few years. I'm not lately, but you can crawl out of that ditch. And the good news is, if you ever did bright line eating before, you have some of these paths already started. Like, it's not as hard in that way. You've already got a brain that knows, oh yeah, you can get happy chemicals this way. Yeah. Now, to do that though, it really takes sisu. Sisu. It takes a lot of sisu, actually, in times like this. Sisu is a Finnish concept that is described as stoic determination, tenacity of purpose, grit, bravery, resilience, and hardiness. And it's held by Finns themselves to express their national character. It's generally considered not to have a literal equivalent in English, so we use the word sisu. Sisu. It's the Finnish word for all of that. Perseverance beyond perseverance. Like you go and then you just go some more. And in times like this, honestly, the practice of coming back to center feels like that. I mean, how much courage does it take to keep coming back to center in a time like this? Like Everett was saying in his presentation, and then you take a deep breath and you come back to center. It's not easy. It's not easy, but it is doable. All right. Let's see if Everett is around still. Everett, I think you are. Hi.
I'm here.
Okay, let me. Hey. So, you know, when this coronavirus thing started, you and I started talking. Like, I mean, in part because you seemed really calm. Well, you were in Maui at first, and it didn't hit Maui as fast as it hit the mainland, I think. You were kind of like, I'm in my Maui bubble.
I have like the minimizer denial
Like, it's okay.
kind of part.
I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm in Maui.
so it takes a
Yeah,
while.
and then a little bit you
Yeah.
were like, oh yeah, I think this is real. But we
Yeah.
started wondering, like, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do for people? And my first idea was like, well, let's offer Brightline Freedom, like help people with their parts, you know? And you loved that idea. And then I was thinking, that course is isn't it? How long is Brightline Freedom? 12 weeks? A long course, 16 weeks.
4 months.
Yeah. And I was like,
16 weeks.
I don't know if you've heard me lately, Everett, talk about coronavirus time. CVT. So it's CVT. Yeah. It's like 16 weeks is too long. Like that's who knows what happens in that landscape. And I also started to think about how we need also to give people help with their food right now as well. So we started to come up with a hybrid course, like a course unlike any course we've ever offered here at Brightline Eating. And so what we're going to do, I know we've already been on this for a long time, but I did warn people this was going to be long. I want to talk about this new course that we're offering for a little bit. You all here on this webinar get the very first chance to register for it if you want. This discussion of the course is going to be short, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. And I think that's it, right, Everett? Have I missed anything?
Yeah. No, oh my gosh. No, you've definitely not missed anything.
Okay. Well, let me, why did my thing go away? Okay, here it is. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so let me talk about the course, and then we're going to do Q&A. All right, my beloveds, I know some of you have been looking forward to this so much. And if you're not into the course, by all means, just stay because the Q&A is going to be epic. You can ask us anything. And this is a sweet opportunity to get some free coaching or, you know, our perspectives on whatever, like anything, really. Everett and I are such open books. So let me share my screen now. This right here. Okay. Yeah, so Everett and I, and really the whole Brightline Eating team, have an invitation for you. My team and I have been working so hard on this lately. It's really all we've been thinking about, and we're so excited about this. It's a course called Brightline Sisu, Calm and Bright Through Crisis. And we're going to offer this course now, and then we'll likely make it evergreen, which means that someone can access it when they're going through a divorce and they need it, you know, when they get a cancer diagnosis and they need it, when they lose their job and they need it, when their child dies, their mother dies, their partner dies, and they need it. The reality is that I know this calamity has brought this truth home for many of us. We are not immune. Life is difficult and crisis happens. It sure does. And so we are excited right now to offer you a course on staying calm and bright through crisis, because there's all this anxiety going on because of this crisis, because we have a brain that has parts that respond to that crisis in particular predictable ways, right? The part right here is saying, I think we should eat, right? The part up here is saying we should not eat. We should, get a hold of ourselves and do something else about that, right? And that's how the brain works. That's how the brain works. And when we take a part's perspective, amazing things happen. I mentioned Lyndon earlier. Lyndon, I've known Lyndon now for 5.5 years. And I don't know that I've ever seen as remarkable a human transformation as Lyndon in those 5.5 years. Since she started doing Bright Line Eating, her parts work has intensified. And then lately, I don't know if you know Lyndon, she's slipped into this state that I almost want to call transcendent. Like she's just become, like some people just become like the Buddha all of a sudden. And she did all this work, all this inner work that led up to it. But the years of parts work over the last 3 or some odd years, I mean, not only did she lose all of her excess weight, and she's just been maintaining, a right-sized body now for 5 years in Bright Line Eating. Like she's one of the, she's really the longest timer we have in Bright Line Eating, with just the most beautiful stretch of working this program. It's just unbelievable. I want to talk also just about Dana Oliver. Dana Oliver was in one of the early boot camps in 2015 as well. And I became her friend because we have a mutual school friend. She was raving about Bright Line Eating and Susan Peirce Thompson. And this girl was like, who? I went to the elementary school with her. Like, what? So anyway, Dana reached out to me by Facebook Messenger, and we ended up going for walks in the Bay Area together when I would be in town. And so we've become really good friends. And Dana was bright for a long time, got her weight off, and then went through a torturous, I think it was like a year of eating sugar every day. Groundhog Day. Every day she would wake up and say, I'm not going to eat sugar today. And by 10 or 11 a.m., she would be eating her first NMF with sugar in it. And every day. Now, this is an interesting thing because she was actually working with Everett privately during this time. Mm-hmm. Working with Everett privately. And then Everett offered Bright Line Freedom, the course, and she took it and she learned in that course, because Everett can't work one-on-one with everybody, who signs up with the course like he would as a practitioner, like private sessions with every person. So what he does is he teaches everybody to do parts work inside themselves. And as soon as she learned how to do her own parts work inside herself through the course, and she could then do it on the spot when that part would come up and say, you should eat now, through the course, she stopped eating and she hasn't had a break since. Like, she is so bright. She's one of the most stable people I know with her lines. And, the most special person in her entire life just died a few months ago. She didn't eat. She just doesn't eat addictively over anything anymore. And then I told you my story about my little horribilizer part. But I was also, as most of you know, having an issue with my lines, where the stress of being Susan Peirce Thompson and trying to figure out how to lead Bright Line Eating was leading me to break my lines periodically. I didn't pack on weight because I had a part of me that would make sure that I stopped eating and got down to weight again. And, as soon as I had to be on camera, got to be back to right size body, but I'd put on a few pounds and then I'd lose them. And I was in this horrible cycle of a torturous cycle. And then I took Bright Line Freedom with Everett, and that stopped. Just stopped. And it was really the combination for me of the Reboot Resume materials and Bright Line Freedom materials that led me to stop picking up my lines. And that's why I'm so excited about this course, because in this course, for the first time, we're going to combine those two components. So, Ev, can you mute yourself, Ev? Because I think your mic is just a little rustly. Cool. Thanks. So in this course, you're going to discover your centered self, your authentic self, your highest self, your centered self. and you're going to learn to return to center. Always. Like no matter what's happening. And then again, because we're never cured, right? Always and again. So the foundation of this course is going to be parts work, that internal family systems, and Everett is going to be teaching us those parts that get activated in crisis. He's also going to be teaching the BLE parts map, right? The food indulger, the food controller. He's got a, he tells me he's got deeper, richer, more in-depth stuff on the Brightline Eating parts map than he's ever taught to our community before. He's still innovating. There's more to it. So this course will have the latest, even more than the last time he taught Brightline Freedom. So he's going to teach the anxious, I don't know what you're calling it, Everett, the anxious, afraid and anxious parts map, and then the BLE parts map as well. And he's going to go into both of those, teach you how to work with your parts so that you can come back to center. Now, there's something I want to mention about parts work is that it's religion and spirituality, or lack thereof, completely compatible. So whatever your spiritual or religious perspective is, this course will help you tap into that and work with it. There is no conflict between what you're going to learn in this course and any spiritual or religious path you might be on. So let's imagine that you are a born-again Christian, for example, and meditation is not something you do or are into. That is okay. And there are journaling exercises that will also take you where you want to go, and those will be what you can use. And as a matter of fact, your faith will be a huge grounding to you. It can be utilized, like Everett will teach you how to utilize your tremendous faith to have basically the transformation more easily, because it will help you to recognize your centered self, right? Like that grounding in your faith will help you come back to center. If you have no spiritual or religious perspective, that's okay too. That's okay too. And this course will help you tap into a very deep inner reservoir that is centered self. And everyone's got it. I mean, you know that the you that's present when you're calm and clear and courageous and connected and curious and center, all those things, right, is a particular self, right? And when you're there, you can feel the root of you growing deep into the ground, like you are grounded. So I wanted to say that. Now in parts work, what you're going to learn to do is release shame. You'll learn to work with an inner critic, the inner critic part of you that is shaming you all the time. And you'll learn to neutralize a lot of that. So your shame will start to be released. Even when you eat, this is the amazing thing. Those last, it's actually possible, even for me, you would think I would have an inner critic that would be screeching at me, you can't eat, you're the leader of the Brightline Eating Free World. Like, what are you doing? Like, what kind of faker are you, right? Like, you can imagine the inner critic that I would have when I break my bright lines, right? It's actually possible to break your bright lines with no shame. Just telling you, and then not do it because of that. It's not a free ride to just, oh, well, then I'll just break my, no. And then once you release that, you're even that much closer to not breaking them anymore at all. So release shame, guilt, anxiety, which of course we're going to talk about a lot, burdens from the past, like things that you're holding on to. There's parts that are holding on to that stuff, wounds from the past. And then what often happens through parts work that you don't realize it's going to happen is that you have layers of hidden and stuck stuff inside of you that just shakes loose and gets transformed and heals really easily. It's quite remarkable. Hidden emotions, buried core issues, and suddenly you sort of get what they're about, and then they start to transform. So my guess is there will be, you might come into this course for this reason and then end up getting all of this instead, right? Like, or in addition to, transformations beyond what you even expect. One of the things Everett's going to teach you is how to unblend from your parts, which means like a part is really active, and for a bit we think it's us. We really think that we're that angry, right? But when you find the angry part, one of the first steps is to check, are you blended with it? Like, how do you feel toward that part? And if it's like, well, I feel angry, then you're still with the part, right? Like you're still thinking you're the part. So you learn there's techniques for unblending from a part, and you're going to learn that, which basically brings you back to centered self, right? As soon as you unblend from that part, you're back to centered self. The part's over there. And then you can get curious and hear what it's angry about. And maybe that part will stop shouting and being so angry if you just hear it out a little bit, right? Just like my horribilizer had its perspective on what it thought I needed to do with my day. And once I heard it out, we just found an easy compromise. And now I don't have bad days anymore. Like how nice is that, right? In 2000 and whatever it was, when I first introduced Everett's Bright Line Freedom course, like he said, the whole thrust behind it was around self-compassion. And the thing about parts work, perhaps, that I love the most, well, second to the rapid nature of the huge transformations and shifts it can produce, the thing I love about it most is that it helps us to finally find our way to self-compassion. Because, I think most of us have gotten the memo that we shouldn't be a jerk to ourselves inside of our own head, right? That we shouldn't talk to ourselves with such fierceness and meanness and critique and so forth. But knowing that we shouldn't is just another thing to beat ourselves up for. Oh, here I am talking to myself that way, right? Parts work is a shortcut to developing genuine self-compassion, because once you personify that part of you, it's almost like you start to interact with it as another person, and it's so easy to feel compassion for other people, right? Not for ourselves, but for other people. And so once we recognize it's a part that's trying to help us, that comes by its perspective, really honestly, like from our past wounds and so forth, this flood of compassion emerges. And boom, we land in a place of self-compassion. It's so powerful. Now, research shows, there's a huge research literature exploding right now, so I'll just run through real quick. The benefits of self-compassion are, it relieves about a third to a half of all depression and anxiety just by improving self-compassion. It leads to increased emotional resilience, emotional intelligence, personal growth. The benefits just go on and on. It's even better than self-esteem, self-compassion, believe it or not. This course is going to provide a clear, comprehensive roadmap and a wonderful mix of methods. So Everett is going to be delivering trainings in parts work. There will be coaching calls. There will be witnessed parts work sessions. There will be guided parts meditations that Everett will do, workbook and journaling exercises. And the whole course is going to live in Bright Liners land. I mean, the course will live on the course website, but the people in the course will live in Bright Liners land, our brand new community. Our brand new community, which I will show you a little bit of right now, but I'll direct you also to the vlog where I did a walkthrough of our new community yesterday in the vlog that was released. Here's the map of the new community. Here are people, here are the profiles. You can click on the people. This is the course in the new community. There's the News Nook. I recorded a video that's already waiting for you in there. Here's the live feed, which I'm going to show you in a second, which is just like your Facebook wall. There are forums, so people can start discussion topics of every ilk, and they will live there forever in the forums. Here are events, so people can post events that are coming up, including online Zoom meetings that people are doing, and all kinds of things like that. This is where the downloads live, and here's the members directory, which you can also, there's the members area and the people area up there, which are pretty similar. So here's the live feed. Here's what used to be called the pinned post over there. And here's the live feed, just like the Facebook thing. And there are separate groups in there, like, for example, Bright Lifers Facebook house and your bootcamp Facebook house. There are all those different groups in there as well. Like there will be a place to have all those different groups. So this course, Brightline Sisu, is really well suited to do in small groups with a buddy, with a mastermind group. You can do parts work on each other. There will be people in the members community who are experienced parts work practitioners. So if you need a little like, hey, I've got this part and it's driving me crazy. Like for me, my horribilizer, who is basically making 50% of my days a living nightmare, right? That's pretty extreme. You know, I needed 5 minutes of Everett's time to like snap me out of that. So there's a lot of potential for group interaction. If you're in a great mastermind group, I suggest that you all get in there and take it together. Lots of ways to collaborate and share. You'll also be able to find mastermind groups and buddies much easier in the new Brightliners Land community. But I also want to say that this approach lends itself really well to what we call self-therapy, which basically means just doing the healing work on your own. And with Everett's materials, you really can get very, very far doing that. You don't need, so if you're an introvert, if you just prefer the idea of doing this work on your own, you absolutely can. So the course is called Brightline Sisu, Calm and Bright Through Crisis. Registration begins April 2nd with this webinar. Like right now, we're opening registration. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and open. Let's see here. Boom. I think I just did that successfully. This is a brand new webinar platform. Okay, do you see on the right side, are you ready? Let's weather the storm together. Register now. So I'm going to keep telling you more about it though. Registration begins April 2nd. That's today. Registration will go for a week and the course will begin April 9th. So the first materials of the course will be released April 9th. Right now is the time when we're all going to be in the community getting used to it and, you know, just having a ball in there, creating. There's going to be an explosion of creation in there as we, you know, explore together. It's going to be super fun. The course lasts 6 weeks. It ends on May 21st. 1 week later, if you're not still, in Brightliners Land because you're a Bright Lifer or because you've now started the boot camp or because you've now joined Bright Lifers or whatever, your access to Brightliners Land will end 1 week after the course ends. You will continue to receive the course, to have the course materials to review as much as you want for 6 more months after May 21st. 6 months from May 21st, your access to the course materials will end. The investment for the course, this is a $497 course. We are giving everyone half off. We just know it's extreme times right now. Right? So everyone gets half off. So the course is $247. You can also do 2 payments of $124. Now we normally would make that like $149 or something like that, like with because it's actually quite labor intensive on the team to do monthly payments. People don't pay them, then you got to chase, you got to all this rigmarole with the credit card company and blah, blah, blah. It's a nightmare. But we have taken out the finance fee. This is just literally half of that rounded off to the nearest whole dollar. So that's another thing we're doing, basically because times are extreme right now. And we're just thinking of all the ways that we can to make things accessible for people. The reason we did 2 payments is because the course is only 6 weeks and the thought of people like having a payment for something that's over just feels kind of yucky, but I'm going to talk more about that in a second. If you're a Bright Lifer, 50% off for everyone, and then you get a Bright Lifers discount of $50 on top of that, so it's $197 for you. And you can also do 2 payments of $99, and again, that's just half of that rounded off to the nearest whole dollar. And on top of that, there is an extreme sliding scale that we have set up, an extreme sliding scale. So if you click register now and you go to the registration page, there is a link I think it's at the bottom. Maybe someone can confirm that for me. That will take you to the scholarship site. So scholarship.brightlineeating.com. Now this video on here, I recorded this forever ago. You can see my hair is way shorter. But I just watched it over and I thought I was going to re-record it because of the COVID-19 and the circumstances we're in. But you know what? I stand by everything I said in that video. Like, Bright Line Eating has always had the heart of, we want everyone to have access to our courses, full stop. And we have never, to my knowledge, like, not on my watch have we ever turned anyone away who couldn't pay for our courses. Like, I have trolls who scroll through social media, and if someone says, oh, that sounds great, but I can't afford it, we private message them and say, you can get in any way, go to the scholarship site, get a scholarship. And before there was a scholarship site, my team would custom set up order forms for people after discussing with them what they could afford to pay. We've always been fanatical about making sure that we include everybody. What you're going to do here now, if there is a donate option at the scholarship. Like, let's say you're like, oh, Susan, you took half off. I want to pay the full amount. Well, just go to the scholarship site and donate then. A lot of people will be getting scholarships, so you can pay for someone's course experience if that's what you want to do. But if you're going to get a scholarship, you want to click apply. You watch this video. Keep in mind it was shot a while ago, but it's still, I still stand by it. Click apply. And then there'll be this video. And once you decide how much you can pay, you go to the next, you click and then you go to Brightline Sisu. And then here's the sliding scale options, okay? Notice that one of the options is just to pay the full price, but make it in more payments. Now, I forget, it's like, let's see, I'm going to do a calculator here. 247 divided by 5 is 49 bucks. So if you want to pay full price, you're not a Bright Lifer, you can do 5 payments of 49 bucks. If you want to pay full price and you are a Bright Lifer, 197 divided by 5 is 39 bucks for 5 months, okay? If you want to activate the sliding scale and dip into the scholarship fund, you can do, now these can be divided into 2 monthly payments. So this could also be 2 payments of 74 or 2 payments of whatever that would be, 49 or something, 2 payments of, I don't know, never make yourself do live math in front of people, 28, 2 payments of 9, 2 payments of $9. So just saying, if you right now your finances are so jacked up, not only have we taken 50% off for everybody, you can take an additional 93% off that and pay $9 for 2 months and be in this course. We want everyone in this course, regardless of ability to pay. Who wants to be in it and is willing to do the work? Now, I haven't finished describing the whole course to you though. There are some bonuses in this course. So the foundation of the course is the parts work that Everett's going to be doing with us on coming back to centered self and working with our fearful and anxious parts and our bright line eating parts and staying bright and so forth. But a bunch of people asked me about the science lectures. I had 3 science lectures lined up for this year's family reunion live in San Diego. And you'll get all 3 of them. All 3 of them. The first one is Ari Whitten and myself, mostly Ari, if I'm honest, presenting on the science of sleep and circadian rhythm. But I will be there with him live. We will do Q&A together. Dude's a genius. Ari Whitten is one of my best friends now, and he is my go-to resource for accurate science on anything. I ask him any question and he sends me a suite of links within moments of articles that have been published on that subject. He is a walking encyclopedia of health information. And I don't know if you've been having a hard time sleeping lately. I normally sleep like a baby and I've been having a hard time sleeping sometimes. The science of sleep and circadian rhythm is really helpful, especially in terms of bright line eating with habit stacks, right? We're really into the bright day, right? The rhythm of the bright day. And there is a huge amount of science that is going to be illuminating that he's going to share here that's going to help us with our sleep and also our habit stacks morning and evening. I'm going to present a greatly expanded, deeper version of what I talked about here on those happy chemicals and cortisol. So you will get a fuller picture of like, okay, well, how do I release dopamine? How do I release serotonin? How do I release oxytocin? How do I release endorphin? And what's going to happen in this course, I predict, out of that information in this lecture is there's going to be a lot of experimenting going on, and people are going to be posting like, I think I got a really good serotonin hit out of this, everybody. Like, and it felt healthy, it felt manageable. So I will be presenting on that. And then Ari is going to also present on mitochondrial health and breaking weight loss plateaus. So keeping your metabolism strong and getting off all of that weight. So breaking weight loss plateaus 101. Now, the other bonus is an entire other course, basically, that's going to run parallel to the Parts Work course that the Bright Line Eating coaching staff and I are going to deliver. This is going to come once a week on Thursdays in the form of a module like the boot camp of me shooting videos in my basement, probably in my little raspberry hat. And it's all going to be about staying bright through crisis. So this is going to be a la the 14-day challenge, a la the boot camp, a la Reboot Resume, all about your food, all about your habits, all about your support, all about staying bright through crisis. And I'm going to be shooting those videos in real time because what we come up with in Brightliners Land is going to really inform what I put into those videos, but it's going to be on food, actions, and support, just like Reboot Resume, but it's going to be new content. This is all new content, people, all new content. So yeah, a weekly video module from Susan, a la the boot camp. Food, action, support. Unlike Reboot Resume, where I separated them, my prediction is in this, I don't know, but my prediction is in this, I'm going to be really looking at the overlap among these three. So food, action, support blended together. And we're going to be looking at compound actions that hit more than one of those buckets. And we hope you will join us. We hope you will join us. This is your invitation. Stay close. Stay close. We hope and intend that this course will galvanize the community. That's what we want it to do, to just bring everyone together, close, supported, bright. Everett, I know that you were saying, this little thing of hair that's bugging me. You were saying that you were imagining people having their brightest 6 weeks ever. Like, just
well, yeah, there's so many people that have problems initially with Bright Line Eating because their life is so chaotic.
Yeah.
It was even like that was the state I was in. Like that first time I tried to do a boot camp and like saw one video. It's because my life was so busy and overwhelming. And then here we all are sitting at home for 2 months. Or whatever it's going to be, right? Like there's a lot of people, I think, that have a chance to give Bright Line Eating a try, who maybe it hasn't felt like they could do it till now. I'm excited by that.
Hey, if you're a Bright Lifer, your registration link is in your Bright Lifers website. There's a banner at the top. That's where you get access to your $50 off. If you're a Bright Lifer, your access is in the Bright Lifers website. Go log in to your Bright Lifers website. Okay.
Well, the other thing I've been telling people too is just imagine if you come out at the end of this 60 days or whatever, having in a right-sized body, or like having, conquered your health in some way. And I really like that is going to dopamine, right? That is going to feel so good.
All right. So let's see here. Tons of questions. Christy is like, this is exactly what I needed. Monica says, if I need time to decide, where do I go to sign up after today? Monica, there will be links in emails that are sent to you.
Yeah.
There will be links in emails that are sent to you. You'll also get a replay of this webinar by email right after this ends. And I believe there's a way to register through that as well. So yeah, take your time, sweetie. You have a week to decide. Okay, Joanne says you mentioned evergreen in the beginning. Now you mentioned available for 6 months after the course is over. Please explain. Okay, so what I'm envisioning is in Brightliners Land. Now, Brightliners Land is new. That's going to be what we create out of this community that we're going to experience together in this course for the first time. But in Brightliners Land, I want to move toward a time where most, maybe even all of our courses are evergreen, meaning they're available either all the time or multiple times throughout the year. I haven't quite envisioned that yet. But this is a course in particular that's most needed when someone needs it, right? Like when they're served with the divorce papers, right? Like you don't, like it's not like, oh, well, this course, like Reboot Resume is offered every January 1st right now. But that's another course that maybe someone needs at other times as well. So I'm imagining that this course will end up being evergreen, which means that someone could register for the course when they need it at any time, right? So that's not you. If you're taking the course now, you're taking the course now. In the future, evergreen means available for other people to register on a rolling basis, like the boot camp is now. The boot camp is evergreen. The 14-day challenge is evergreen. For you, you're registering now. And those people too, when they register, they will get, access to the course materials for 6 months after the course ends, would be my guess. Yeah. Okay. So many questions. Sandy says, I just signed up. Yay. And Debbie says, registered and excited to start. Jaylani says, can we see the rest of the slides for the crisis response parts? That was fascinating to me. Yeah. Did you catch that Everett's going to do the rest of them on the other webinars? But are those going to be in the course too? We can make those slides available somehow?
Oh, sure. Yeah, those will be in the course. That'll be the first lesson, actually, will be the more in-depth lecture on all of that.
Yeah. So I also want to mention the new platform has lots of tutorials and there's a whole week to get used to it in there. So I think it's pretty intuitive. In my mind, it's a lot simpler than Facebook, but there's also a lot of tutorials. So yeah, I'm excited about that if anyone's concerned about how to use it. Amy has an interesting one. Everett, when we had our imagined conversation with our part and they explained why they were doing what they were doing, what if their goal is admirable and their methods are reasonable? Example, my accountant wants to create order out of chaos and get it all down on paper so we can tackle things one at a time and cross them off the list.
Well, that's a good example of how a part isn't always hurting, right? So now you from your centered self may actually, now if you're obsessively keeping track, like sometimes those accountant parts are generating overwhelm because they're trying to keep track of so many different things. So that would be an example of a part that you might want to unblend from, right? But if your accountant is just in balance, doing a great job, well, there's no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not trying to, parts are not bad. Parts are trying to help, and we have a lot of parts that are doing great jobs, and we want them to do what they're doing.
Totally. Like,
yeah.
Just saying, I have a manager part that y'all are really glad that I have, because I used to be a hot mess. I couldn't function practically. I dropped out. I went to 3 different high schools and then dropped out. This manager part was created somewhere along the way, and she's keeps me on track and keeps my life, organized. And I need her. I bow down to her, and I care about her a lot. And I'm really, when she's upset, I'm really concerned to make her, she feels like one of my best employees or something is how I think of her, right? Need to keep her functioning well. Her name's Lainey because she wants everybody to just stay in their lane, so yeah. And, Yeah. So sometimes our parts are extremely helpful, and Everett teaches us how to transform our parts so that we actually put them to really good use. Like they can become amazing helpers on our journey. Yeah. Say more about that, Everett.
Usually, yeah, like if a part is in an extreme role, usually it's protecting a wound.
Yeah.
And something that I didn't even touch into is in parts work in internal family systems, we actually have ways to go heal our wounds. And so if you heal that wound, then the protector that's popped up to protect it can relax and change its role.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of healing, that aspect of IFS where we do healing. Also, there was a question that buzzed by that I thought I would address, which someone was saying she's new to parts work, and she's curious whether I'm going to be focused mainly on crisis generating parts, or will I be like presenting the whole BLE parts map, and I'm really going to be teaching about all the parts. Initially, I'll be talking about the crisis response parts in the first lesson, and then I'll be starting to teach you how to do parts work and how to work with all the parts in the BLE parts map. And I'll be doing it in a way that will be easy for someone that doesn't know anything, but then is also adaptive for people that have been doing this for a while.
Got it. Okay, I actually have an announcement. My team just informed me. I'm so sorry. The Bright Lifers banner isn't up yet. So sorry. This is how, like, responding as fast as we did, pulling a course together in like a week is utter insanity. But that's what we've done. And so the banner's not up yet, but Stephen is working on it right now. Like, he's on it. My guess is that by the end of this Q&A, it'll be up. We'll see. Yeah. I predict. So all you Bright Lifers who are trying to go into your Bright Lifers website and you don't see a big banner that says register for Brightline Sisu now, just be patient with us. I hope by the end of this webinar, it will be up. Oh, God bless Stephen. He has been pulling a lot of late nights. Maureen wants to know, Everett, is there much overlap between this course and the Bright Lifers Inner Circle? Or the Bright,
no.
There isn't much overlap between...
You mean the Inner Circle?
The Brightline Freedom Inner Circle.
Oh, Brightline Freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah, there will be overlap because I teach about the BLE parts map in Brightline Freedom. So you're going to be getting, you're going to learn about the BLE parts map, but I'm not going to be teaching you IFS peer facilitation, which is what I teach in the Freedom course.
Yeah.
So it's like a subset of Brightline Freedom.
Yeah. Tommy says, where do we need to go to access the scholarship? Tommy, just go to scholarship.brightlineeating.com. And I think if you also just click on the register link and then you look on that order form, I think down below maybe it says there's a link to the scholarship site as well. But you can just type right into your web browser, scholarship.brightlineeating.com. Susan wants to know, will there be a limit of how many can join the course? No, Susan, we just really want to serve everyone we can right now. And I'm really excited to get as many people as we can into Brightliners land. So we are not going to cap this course. Okay, the new platform, will that mean that I don't use Facebook when I join it? Wants to know Marilyn. Correct. I mean, you can, yeah, you won't have to use Facebook at all for this course. We still have all of the other things that we have currently housed in Facebook for Brightline Eating, but this course will not be in Facebook at all. Harvetta says, how do I sign up? Oh, sweetheart. I'm not in your interface. Is there a thing on the right that has the, what does it look like? Is it like, do you see a woman meditating and it says, let's weather the storm together, register now? Do you see that? Is it on the right for you? Harvetta, do you see it? Tell her to click the 3 dots on the red. Oh, thank you, Stacy. Yeah. Click on the 3 dots on the right, or people are saying there's an offer button at the bottom. Click on the arrow near the offer. It sounds very confusing. I don't know what they're seeing. There's an arrow, there's 3 dots, it's at the bottom, you have to scroll down, someone says. Oh my gosh. Well, Harvetta, um, hopefully you're figuring it out. Um, Christy says, will there be things we need for this course? I don't think so. Internet
Not
access.
really.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, there's no required reading.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
all the content's going to be delivered in lectures. There'll be workbooks. So you'll be getting things in the
Okay.
course itself.
All right. Um, all right. Jenny says, all registered. Yay, Jenny, welcome. Thank you as always for the awesome info and presentation. Everett, I'm a tad confused. At the 2018 AFR, you introduced 5 parts: inner critic, isolator, controller, indulger, wounded child. At the 2019 AFR, you drill down to 8 characters each for the isolator and the indulger. I don't understand. Are these 15 new parts or characters of the original 5 parts? Jenny.
Yeah, they're different, like just like that crisis response part has got like 15 archetypes, right? Because when that part gets triggered in different people, it shows up differently. So and I was actually evolving. That's part of the creativity and the way I've been evolving my work in Bright Line Eating. Is a year later, I had much more insight into the isolator, and I was able to break out all the archetypes of the isolator. So it's still, the BLE parts map is still those categories of parts, right? The inner critic, there's a bunch of different types of inner critics, right? There's a bunch of different types of isolators. There's different types of managers. There's different types of indulgers. But that same 5 characters is the basis of the BLE parts map.
Yeah. And just saying, Jenny, like, I'm a newbie to parts work. Everett's been doing this forever, but like, so I've picked Everett's brain about this a little bit. So let me share a little bit about what I've learned. So he said that some people have parts inside of them that seem really consistent, like my Lainey would be one, my manager part. She's always there. She's operating every day. She's the one who's trying to keep it all organized. She's the one who's trying to get me to bed on time so I can wake up and meditate. Like, and I met her when I first started doing parts work, and she's been there. Everett says that sometimes, like, a cluster of parts will crop up over a specific issue or thing that happens, and he'll kind of work with those parts, and then they'll kind of like go away, and then maybe you'll never see them again. Those parts could just be gone. You might not have all of the different type of indulgers, all the different type of, like, you might only relate to a couple of those, right? One of the things that's neat about parts work is we don't really need to go fishing for our parts too much. What happens is we live our life. Right. And then when something happens and we are thrown off center, we use that, Everett calls it a trailhead. We use that as entree into what's active now. Like, you don't have to go like borrowing trouble, right? Like, just respond to the parts that get activated in life. Just if you're living sort of steady, just stay steady, and then wait until you get triggered. And then you can find some parts. And so, yeah, there are a lot of potential archetypes of parts. You might not have all those at all.
Yeah, and maybe that's the clarification, is that what I did a year later was break out different types of isolators. And you might recognize 2 or 3 of those as the type of isolator you have.
Yeah.
And you don't have them all. We typically don't. Like, my crisis response parts are the minimizer, the denier, the over-preparer, and stockpiler. Yeah. And then a lot of those I didn't relate to.
So I hope that helps, Jenny. So Stacy said, I signed up without getting my Bright Lifers price. How can it be adjusted? Super easy. Just go to support.brightlineeating.com and then click on the relevant thing. You might need to just scroll down and say, I need more help. Submit a ticket there, and my team will get you the difference refunded. If you can be patient, of course, because we're launching this course out of the blue, and there will be a lot of support tickets submitted now, but we'll get you your $50 back for sure.
And the Lifers banner is up, I'm seeing. People are,
Whoa! Yay! Steven's so fast. That's awesome.
yeah.
Yay!
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're a Bright Lifer, go to the Bright Lifers website, which I think is lifers.brightlineeating.com or whatever it is. That's so funny that I don't even now. I'm obsessive. I gotta check. Lifers. Brightline. Yeah, lifers.brightlineeating.com. Yes, it is. Okay. And yep, and you can register for the course. So a bunch of people have similar questions or comments. Sunny says, I'm uncomfortable using Facebook. Is this course the only way on accessing the new Bright Lifers land? Sue had the same question. Do we have to take this course in order to access the new platform? Marilyn has a similar question. I'm sorry, I'm confused. Read the new platform. Eventually, will all that is on Facebook be over to the new platform, or just this one course is at the new platform? Okay, so right now, this course is the only way to access Brightliners land. It's the only way right now. My guess is that won't be the case for super, super long. But let me and my team get in there. I just saw this new platform option for the first time like 10 days ago. So I want to see how it works for the community. I see umpty ways that it's better than Facebook, not the least of which is that 20% of people refuse to be in Facebook, right? So it's a more inclusive platform, right? Because there aren't 20% of people who have a reason to not be in it in the first place. So what I don't know is the path or the process or the speed by which we will make the platform available to other people in Brightline Eating and what exactly that's going to look like. This is what I was talking about in the vlog yesterday. If you caught the vlog yesterday when I said a lot is coming down the pike in Brightline Eating land, and I'm going to be communicating with you as clearly as I can as soon as I know what I know. So as soon as I have answers to these questions, I'll be letting you know in a vlog, in emails. So I would say over the next couple months, 2, 3, 4 months, probably just 2 would even be my guess. Just keep your ear to the train tracks because we are going to be figuring all this out and building it and creating options for you. I want Brightliners Land to work, and I want you in it. That's my goal. So how exactly that's going to look at the moment, I don't know. Okay. So more questions. Paula wants to know, what's the estimated time commitment for this course? And Leslie says similar, how much time will be required to participate in the course? Is it set times to gather, or can I do the work in my own time? Yeah, Everett, you go ahead and then I'll chime in as well.
Yeah, typically. So for the part of the course, the parts work stuff, I deliver a lecture every week, which is 30 to 60 minutes, and a guided meditation, and maybe a workbook or questionnaire, and so that's kind of the parts work piece of it, and then there's other things like you're going to have some other things that you're delivering too, Susan, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you that with that same format, which sounds like Brightline Freedom, that's similar to Brightline Freedom, yes? So if you've done Brightline Freedom, similar to that same format, Everett's component, I took Brightline Freedom and experienced huge transformations. And I'll be honest, I only did the first 4 weeks of the 16-week course. Huge transformations in those 4 weeks, mind-blowing. And I probably spent no more than 2 hours a week. No more than 2 hours a week on it. Total, like, yeah, an hour and a half to 2 hours a week. Now, this course will also have the community platform, which of course could be a time suck if you invest a lot of time in it, or you could never go in there, right? So that's hugely variable, but consider that to be similar to Facebook, right? Like you probably have a sense of like, you can make of that what you want. And then the food part, my guess is you'll be able to watch the module of videos in, 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes an hour-ish each week, you could split that up 10 minutes a day, max, 5-10 minutes a day, because they'll be short little videos, right? And yeah, and then 3 science lectures in the 6 weeks. So, my guess is if you can commit a couple hours a week, 2 to 3 hours a week, you'll get huge value from this course.
And if you're someone that's got a lot of time on their hands, I mean, you could spend a lot of time on things.
Yes, you really
especially
could.
with interacting with other people.
Yes. Lynn says, I'm a Bright Lifer. Will the registration system automatically reduce the cost for me? Yeah, Lynn. So if you just use the banner in Bright Lifers, you should be going to an order form that says it's $197. So that's how you know that you're on the right form. Phyllis says, how will we have access to our special interest groups on the new platform? So on the new platform, there's a page that has tiles, kind of like apps on a phone, for each group. So there'll be the special interest group for, parents of young kids, and for gastric bypass surgery. And then there'll also be all the old boot camp houses, Heart House and Homestead House and all those, they'll all, and we don't have all that set up yet, but that's how that will work. I'm in my 4th week of boot camp, doing great, not overwhelmed with the pandemic. Why do I need this course? Diane says. Maybe you don't. You might want to be in if you are curious about the new platform and you want to check it out. You might want to be in this course if you want to experience some of the parts work, because my guess is that, life is still showing up for you in some kind of ways, and you're not calm, clear, centered, grounded, 24/7, 365, 100% of the time. So this parts work will give you tools for identifying your inner landscape and working with those parts that come up, not because of panic over the pandemic, but just for any reason.
Yeah. Oh, and also, Susan, I hear from a lot of people that, BLE brought them the program, but it's the parts work that's made it sustainable for them to have this as a, and I've heard that over and over and over. So it may be that it's going to be the thing you need for the sustainability once the weight comes off.
Yeah. And people want to know if it's at a certain set time of day starting April 9th. No, not really. The only things that'll be at a certain time of day are the coaching calls, which are live group coaching calls. But are the times going to rotate, Everett? I think my team, I'm going to have my team be doing some as well for food related stuff. The times of day will rotate. Those will be recorded too. So if you can't access those live, you could send in a question. Judy says, Susan, are you offering a section of this class for people who plateau with Ari? Judy, everyone will get access to the information on the science of beating weight loss plateaus with Ari Whitten and myself. So everyone will have access to that. It's not a special section of the course. It's a bonus that's offered to everybody. And it's going to be a lecture. And then, you'll take that information and walk away from that lecture with several, like a bunch, I would say at least half a dozen very concrete strategies that are scientifically grounded for beating weight loss plateaus. Elizabeth is such a dear. She says, what is NMF? I'm new to Brightline Eating. Oh, it stands for not my food. So instead of listing all the sugar and flour things, lest we trigger somebody, we just say NMF. Phyllis wants to know, will this be like the 14-day challenge with daily videos? No, I was thinking about that, but I'm not going to do a daily video. I think it's going to be more like the boot camp with a module of videos, but you could watch them one a day if you wanted to. Sandy says, I'm in boot camp. Can I do both, as I just signed up? You can, Sandy, if you have time. If you have to, that's completely, and I know I'm not one of them, but there are a lot of people who've got a ton of time right now. And if you have time on your hands, you totally could do both courses right now. It's up to you.
Oh, someone is asking, they said, I'm not doing BLE work. If I'm not doing BLE, would I get something out of the course? And yes, you will.
Yeah. Totally.
You will absolutely will. Yeah, I mean, that is the wonderful surprise people have from doing parts work around BLE is you get this tool set that is so broadly applicable to other areas of your life.
Yeah. Teresa a while ago said that she was having some registration issues. Teresa, contact support with your issue. So go to support.brightlineeating.com and then right into the support team. They'll help you. Deborah wants to know if Brightline Freedom is available now. It is not. It is not available now. But this course is.
This is a great way to get a head start.
Yeah, totally. Oh, Lisa. Lisa said, I'm afraid to sign up for this course because I've not been successful at all during my time in Brightline Eating. What would you recommend? Thank you. What do you think, Everett?
Oh my gosh, yes. Sign up for the course, learn parts work. That's like, that might be what you're missing. That might be what you're missing. And then all the content that Susan's going to have around staying bright. Like this is probably going to be the most support that we've ever created for helping people stay bright. And there's going to be this giant community of people, like that kind of group energy. Because that was part of the vision, was to create support for people so that people's programs don't fall apart right now through this stressful time that we're in.
Yeah. But Lisa, the other thing is that this community platform, you've never experienced it before, and it provides very concrete ways to identify that you're someone who needs support and to seek out people who can provide support. We've never had a platform that facilitated that. It's sort of like online dating. You know, if you're like, I've never been successful finding a partner before. Should I do online dating? It's like, well, if you've never done it before, like that is a way to meet a whole lot of people in a way that, like, so just saying this platform is going to allow you to find people who are explicitly saying, I can help someone who's struggling right now, even in just their posts. And you could even passively just say, I'm a struggler, I need help. And then people will be able to see that and reach out to you. So I don't know, for example,
and typically,
yeah, go ahead, Everett.
Yeah, and I was going to say, typically when someone shows up and says, I've never been successful in BLE, it means they have a strong isolator, and they've not really gotten the kind of support that's available.
Yeah.
And again, and the isolator is another part in the BLE parts map that we learn about, is how to loosen that up. And yeah, so be unstoppable. That's the thing we know about here. If you stay in the game, eventually you're going to get it. Eventually it's going to click.
That's right. And the other thing I want to say, Lisa, is stay curious about why it hasn't clicked so far. You've got parts that have been blocking your success for really good reasons. They're scared about something, right? They're concerned about something. So stay curious about why you haven't been successful so far. Okay. Mariposa, no. Mariaspa says, can you please mention again about the scholarship and the minimum price? Yes. So on the scholarship page, the minimum price, I believe it would be $9 US for 2 months. So $9 this month and $9 next month. That is the minimum. So that's 50% off the top and then 93% off of that. So if you want Brightline Eating to cover 97% or whatever it is of your course registration fee, we will do that. Okay, Dory has a question from way back. She said, my main goal is to strengthen myself so I can better support my loved one who is in healthcare and on the front lines. How will this help me with this?
Oh my God, in so many ways, right? Like, I mean, this is the conversation about getting, as you get to know your crisis response parts and learn how to work with them, then you're going to be able to show up from your centered self. I mean, it's kind of that simple. And and there's going to be such a focus on, again, this is the Sisu aspect of what we're doing, right? Like how do you tap into that courageous centeredness, right? Where you're really, obviously you're showing up for someone in such an important way. So it's kind of central to what we're going to be teaching. And thank you for that, and thank your partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sherry says, can I watch this presentation again? Yes, you'll get a replay link right after it's over, I do believe. Tice says, oh, Susan, you're one of a kind. Can you explore more about the split brain research, vertical cut versus lower and higher brain, horizontal cut? I don't know if you're asking me to explore it personally or to share with you. I don't actually know anything about horizontal cut. I don't know that surgery has ever actually been done. That's my knowledge.
Terrible.
Never heard of it. But the lizard brain and then the cortex and stuff, that's kind of like the lower brain and then the higher brain. That's sort of the notion. In short, left brain is happy, right brain is depressive. Left brain definitely has some more analytical stuff to it. It's got language in there. Right brain has music and nonverbal processing, spatial processing. Lower brain is like basic bodily functions. Upper brain is like higher reasoning. I don't know if that's what you're asking, sweetheart, but anyway. All right. Can the parts work with known health issues that require a restricted diet like SIBO?
So it's very, and so there are studies that show like IFS helping people with arthritis. Like there's some actual studies that show how parts work can be effective for physical issues. And it's not much of a leap to think because our parts show up in our body that we might be able to do some parts work. And what I've always found is even if it doesn't help, it usually will give you some very interesting information to personify something that's happening with you physically and do that inquiry of like, how are you trying to help me? Right? Like to personify the SIBO and ask that question, how are you trying to help me? And sometimes what happens is we have parts that are driving us to go, 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 go. And the only way that we can be stopped is for our body to start breaking down in order to stop the movement. And so there's a lot of, you might discover something like that, and then that might lead you to like, oh, I have a part that's really overactive, that's pushing me all the time. And then you do the healing or transformation around that part, and then the physical symptom doesn't have to show up anymore. So I know people always get something useful out of that exploration, and sometimes get relief.
All right. Someone wants to know if you'll get access to the Brightliners Land before April 9th. Yes, you get access to it. It might take a little while for the email to kick in. Someone was saying that they registered a few hours ago and they've not received an email to join Brightliners Land. That email might take a little bit. If you don't have it by tomorrow and you registered already, then definitely let my support team know. Go to support.brightlineeating.com and let my team know, Natalie, if you don't have that by tomorrow. But yes, you will get access to Brightliners Land so you can play around in there leading up to the course starting on April 9th. And Maureen said, thanks for such good information today. You're so welcome. Christy says, will we get a reminder? I have 3 kids at home with me in Ontario, and they just announced there'll be online schooling on the 6th. Will we need Facebook to get into the course? You won't need Facebook, and you will get plenty of email reminders. Totally. You will get probably every day from me for the next week. So I hope you don't get super sick of me. Sorry. Let's see here. Misty says, I have so many questions and most of them revolve around the neurotransmitters. I have bipolar disorder. Is it possible for me to achieve these moments of gaining dopamine, serotonin, etc., like other people using this program? Yes, totally. My kids are both ADHD and struggling to eat now, and I'm super worried about them. Can I ask for advice about them? Can I ask for advice for them? Oh, sweetheart. Yeah, feeding kids is just the hardest thing in this society. I just, honestly, I do recommend. Have you, Misty? Have you been in the boot camp? I actually, read my book. I have a section. All of my honest advice about feeding kids is in the book, Bright Line Eating: The Science of Living Happy, Thin, and Free. It's such a nuanced thing. You can also search the vlog at brightlineeating.com and then click on blog. And I've got, Google kids or family feeding kids in the blog, the search button, not Google, but in the search button. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay, let's see. What else? Will the Facebook official Bright Line Eating group go away? If so, when? Suzanne. As of right now, Suzanne, I don't have any plans to make that group go away. All right, we have 15 minutes before our event automatically ends. I just found out that the maximum is 4 hours. How long do you have to register? Until I believe it's April 9th, on the day the course starts. Laura says, is there any penalty to using the scholarship? Is there a limit to when the next time you can use the scholarship is in the future? Laura, there's no penalty and there's no limit. You need our support, you got it. Forever and ever. Like, there's no penalty. You don't have to prove any particular level of income. We trust you. Just go through the scholarship process, pay what you can, and you're in, sweetheart. We got you. We We just want you here. We want to support you. You're in. Joanne says, I just signed up. Thank you for the scholarship. Made it possible for me to say yes. This presentation has been awesome from start to finish. As always, Susan, you don't disappoint. Question, I'm in my 9th week of boot camp now, waiting to hear about Bright Lifers, but thinking this is essential for long-term recovery. Would you recommend doing both? Joanne, since you said you just used the scholarship, don't sign up for Bright Lifers now. At the end of this course, focus on this course. At the end of this course, there will be an on-ramp into Bright Lifers for you, and then you can focus on that. And there will be a scholarship available then too. Yes, I think. Barbara says, will any information from the Facebook groups become available, or will we auto transfer into the new platform? It'll be more like, just make sure you're in Bright Liners land, and then the Facebook groups, the names of the groups, like Homestead House or Gastric Bypass Special Interest Group or whatever, will just start to appear, and we'll just start to like create groups that we used to have in Facebook in the new platform. So you just need to make sure that you're in Bright Liners land, and then it'll be created that way. And then everyone who is in that Facebook group will automatically have access to that group in Bright Liners land. Carol says, I'm registered. I am totally grateful for the scholarship. I've been on sick leave for 3 months, and with the actual crisis happening, I so much need something like this. I'm so glad, Carol. So sweet. Leah says, when will we get login information? You should get an email after you register. If hours go by and you don't, go to support.brightlineeating.com and say, hey, here's my email address. I just registered for Brightline Sisu and I didn't get any welcome email with instructions. There's a series of, I believe, 3 emails that get trigger when you sign up. One of them is on joining Bright Liners land, and that one comes separate. And it might take a little while to get triggered, but hopefully it'll all work. Oh, Joanne says, oh God, I'm crying. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Everett. Oh, Joanne, bless your sweet heart. Sweetheart, we are so honored to serve you. We are so honored to serve you. Truly, truly. Sweetheart, bless you. Bless you. Oh. Ah. Kathy Rude says, thank you so much for this webinar. It's been a great way to start the morning here in Australia. Sue says, if you don't take the course, will you be able to be a part of Brightliners Land eventually, or Bright Lifers Land? Yes, totally. I mean, assuming it works out, and assuming the community platform isn't a total. I would say the only people guaranteed to get some experience in it, guaranteed, are the people signing up for this course, because there's some non-zero probability that it'll be a total bust and we'll retreat back to Facebook. But I don't predict that. But yeah. There's some possibility. Let's see here. Phyllis, I did it. I signed up, and I'm so excited to get out of the ditch of fear and anxiety. Thank you, Susan and Britt. I love it.
Yes.
Christy says, awesome. I'm never sick of you. I'm on the site now getting my profile edited. I love this. Doris, much gratitude for you both. Thank you beyond words for this course, this webinar, just everything. Oh, you're welcome, Doris. You're welcome. Amy says, learning about the limited amount of willpower and how to replenish it was a life-changing concept for me. How does Sisu compare to that? I don't know. So Sisu is more like, I would say, I don't think it's going to be like that, like a life-changing concept for you. I think it's more like our notion in Brightline Eating of unstoppability. Remember the woman, Lisa, who said, why should I sign up for this course? I've never been successful in my Brightline Eating journey so far. And I presume she's done a bunch of things, right? It's like that. It's like, well, that's Sisu is like, and you keep going, you know?
You keep going.
Keep going.
Yeah.
You keep going. Christy says, what is a mastermind? It's in the profile support section. A mastermind is a group of usually 4 people who meet together, usually weekly, to support each other on their Brightline Eating journey. You could find a mastermind group very easily in Brightliners Land. That's one of the good things about it. You will all get a replay link. Yes, you can watch the presentation again. You will get a replay link by email automatically when this ends. I believe we only have like 5 or 6 more minutes. Jill has an important one, Everett. Can this course help with stress and anxiety due to big T trauma? Please address big T trauma with Jill.
Yeah, so big T trauma, I assume, means complex trauma in your past, right? Some kind of, pretty intense abuse. And IFS is great for that. And the process is very, goes deep quick. So if someone with big T trauma that is feeling very triggerable, right, might find that the content in the course doesn't work for them. It just creates too much of your past gets triggered. Now, on the other hand, a lot of people in Brightline Eating have big T trauma, and a lot of them have spent years and years and years and years working on it. And so when they come into something like Brightline Freedom or something that allows them to work with their trauma in a new way, it's very manageable. It's very manageable. If you're unsure, I would check with your a therapist or mental health professional and get a recommendation.
Yeah. Carol had some happy news for me. Thank you for reassuring me, Carol. She says, all 3 emails are here within 10 minutes. Just fabulous. Thank you for a great evening.
Wow.
Thank you for that reassurance, Carol. I'm glad the autoresponders are working for somebody at least. Brenda said, I did it. I registered. Thank you for the scholarship. I've been doing Brightline Eating for 1.5 years. I love it. I've always wanted to join, and now I was able to. I'm so glad. So glad. Yeah. Oh, so much love coming in here. Oh, look at this. Christy's all caps. Ooh, yippee. I'm in for a mastermind group. I'm excited to learn more all around. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. I know I could say that we are all so grateful for you both for setting this up. Oh, you're welcome. Shannon says, I was thinking about signing up for a boot camp for major help in keeping Brightline Eating. Will this new course do the same? Yeah, I would sign up for this new course right now, Shannon, if that's what you're looking for. And then coming out of this course, There'll be an opportunity to get into the boot camp or Bright Lifers if you qualify or whatever, but just hop into this course for now. Totally.
Yeah, the course is designed for that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think we should end before they kick us out.
Right? Yeah. Otherwise we just disappear,
yeah,
right?
Totally. Susie says only 2 emails have arrived. Just be patient, sweetheart. And if tomorrow morning you don't have the third one, go ahead. Make sure you one of the emails only comes when you follow the instructions in the first email. You have to actually log in to your account, and then that triggers the third email, I believe. So make sure you follow all the instructions in the 2 emails you got. And if by tomorrow you don't have that third email, go to support.brightlineeating.com. Diana says, I'm about to register. I wasn't ready when you offered your last program, but now I'm ready. I'm a sugar addict looking to get free. Oh, yay. Jill says, thank you for the non-Facebook option. You're welcome. I know we've been working on this for 5 years. Ridiculous. Connie says, what time of day is the course? The course is mostly videos and stuff that you can watch at any time, Connie. The only thing that's at a specific time is the coaching calls, but those are recorded too, so you can listen to those later as well. Marie says, parts work is what I need now. Applause. Yay.
That's what we all need. Yeah.
Amy says, Susan and Everett, lovely spending the afternoon with you. May this new program be successful. I got invited out to eat by my hubby. So we've chosen a Thai restaurant to get takeout. I will do my best to make a good BLE choice. You got this, girlfriend. You got this. Sweet. Will Brightline Mind, Jessa says, will Brightline Mind or Brightline Freedom be made available to Bright Lifers who aren't able to do the family reunion? So Jessa, right now our plan is that the next course that will be offered is Brightline Mind. And for those who don't know, that's my college level positive psychology course on the psychology of being happier after this course. And actually, yeah, registration might start while this course is still going. We'll see. Yeah, and then Brightline Freedom, we're planning to offer before this year is up too. Oh, my dears. Lori says, loved the presentation. Thank you, Susan and Everett. Oh, I hate to end it before it feels time, but we gotta go.
We
gotta go. Okay, sweethearts, I think we're gonna sign off. We're doing this again if you can't get enough.
Yeah.
We're doing this again. Live.
Yep, and there'll be some different content.
Yep, we'll be doing this live again on Sunday the 5th of April, 2:30 p.m. And then again Wednesday, 3 days later after that, the 8th of April at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. Bye, everyone. Love you. Look at all the love coming into the chat thread. So sweet.
Yay.
Love you.
So excited to be working with you.
Yay. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Yeah, thanks, Everett.
Yeah.
Super sweet. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.